Good evening, Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and well, season 2024 is officially over, and our dreams of making a fourth consecutive finals appearance have been dashed as we experienced a power outage at the G, going down to Port by 2 points. Joining me tonight to dissect another game where we fell agonisingly short is longtime Demonlander George. Good evening, George.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening to Bin Man. Good evening to our very, very faithful listeners. Well, the good news for this week is that Carlton, Essendon and Collingwood are all out of the 8 and they're likely to stay out. So there's some really good things to build the program on for tonight.
Yeah, what's that called? Schadenfreude. That's what I'm living.
That's it. We'll live in it.
That's all that's getting me through my footy week these days. And also joining us tonight to give us that glimmer of hope for season 2025 is B-Man. Good evening, B-Man.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, George. Good evening, Demonland faithful. As you're probably not surprised, I'm quite bullish about, I was a bit more bullish until about 25, until I heard that Petrarca's 100% leaving the club in the season that just keeps on giving. Another 2-point loss. How many games have we lost by under a goal this year?
4 games for a combination of 10 points or something like that. Combined total.
Two of the current top 4 we've lost under 2 points. So, it's been a painful season. So, in some respects, it was a fantastic performance, and we'll get into it. But obviously, when you lose, it colours the perception. But perspective's been my key word in the last few weeks, and putting in perspective is Port are currently sitting second on the ladder, and we almost rolled them, despite the fact we had obviously a fairly sort of underdone team. Lots of talk that seems to be pretty on the money about many players being really, really sick, potentially COVID going through the club. Not that that's an excuse, but come on. So I thought a fantastic performance, really, in many respects, and also a fantastic coaching performance by Goody for reasons that we'll unpack. But it has been a hell of a season, hasn't it? In some respects, it's there's some benefit to being out of the race for the finals at this stage, because I've done I've accepted it. I've skipped through the stages of grief, and the weather was magnificent today, and I can fully focus my energies on the upcoming spring carnival racing season. So I get right stuck into it. So,
well, I'm still firmly in denial. So
I can't see any benefits of not being in the finals.
Well, other than partly the draft order. So, what draft do we get? What draft do we get? Pick do we get for 13th? So
6 at the moment.
At the moment, 6. So we can do better than that, because I think we can fall below St Kilda. Take pick number 5.
We picked up Windsor at pick 7, so another high draft pick. To complement our other guns. So that's a positive, but more just because, unless nothing magic was going to happen, so we weren't going to be competitive. And whilst it would have been great to, see finals, and, at least we're not Essendon.
Well, according to the media, we're going to lose Petrarca, we're going to lose Oliver, we're going to lose _𝗍cie. So how many more draft picks will that net us? Quite a few.
We've lost Gus. There's like 4 top 10 draft picks. Yeah. So
Rivers, Nibbler and Sparrow for our starting midfield next year.
And Bowie is ruck.
Yes. All right, well, let's go into some housekeeping. Each week I do put a call out for our loyal listeners to help us out by leaving us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts. We love the feedback, and we do reward our loyal listeners who have taken the time to provide us these 5-star reviews by giving them a shout out on the show. And Alex, no fancy name, writes, as a long-time listener and long-time reader of Demonland, I take so much from this podcast. On Monday nights, I spend a fair bit of time in the car with my 16-year-old. He has the clinical definition of JMFCSS, juvenile MFCSS. He would say, I've had to wait 13 long years for a flag. I want one every year. Alex No Fancy Name goes on to say, and the rational analysis of this podcast is a lovely antidote to the irrational adolescent tantrums I face on a daily basis, mainly from the well-paid media experts, but also from the 16-year-old. Thanks. Have you considered signing up to the NDIS as a care provider? Well, thank you, Alex, for that great review. We really do appreciate it. And yes, we have considered signing up to the NDIS, but I really don't want a current affair to be be running up to me with a camera crew and I have to run away from them as I slink away from the MCG. But keep that feedback coming. We will give you a shout out on the show. If you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you want to leave us feedback or post a comment or a question for the show, you can post under our podcast post each week or just slide into our DMs. In addition to being available on Apple, Google, Spotify, SoundCloud, and or any of your preferred podcasting apps, the Demonland podcast is available to be watched and listened to on YouTube. So just search for Demonland podcast. You can find our channel. If you want to chat with other Demon fans and you've never been to our forum, you can see it melting down in real time at the moment with the news that Christian Petrarca might want to be leaving. So head on over to demonland.com, sign up. You can chat with other Demon fans from across Australia and around the world. It's completely free. And in addition to melting down, you can post questions or comments for this show. And as always, there's a plethora of topics and threads discussing all things demons related. So join up to melt down with the rest of the Demonland crew. And if you'd like to join us on the air tonight to melt down as well and talk about any of the topics we're going to talk about, please give us a call on 0390163666. That's 0390163666. I'll answer, put you on mute, and then bring you on when there is a break in the conversation. And during the week, give that number a call. You can leave us a message. We'll play it out on the show. If you're listening to us live, come join us in the chat room. Simply head on over to demonland.com/podcast. We're live every Monday, so if you want to listen to the show live, head on over to demonland.com on a Monday night at 7:30 p.m.
Before you go on, Andy, into the Demonland is proof of concept, isn't it, of the social media algorithms are geared towards angst and conflict and in terms of reach, because I can't just before we came on air, I didn't even know about the track thing, and it's seemed to be already up to about 25 pages.
Well, anyone who's listening tomorrow, being Tuesday, and doesn't know anything about it, doesn't have social media, there was a news item on Channel 9 tonight from Tom Morris, who is saying that Petrarca is disgruntled or disillusioned, wants out, and I think that's really all there is to the story at the moment.
And Tom Morris is the byline, so that's really the key bit of information, isn't it? And it's interesting, Andy. Demonland seems to have spiralled and sort of.
Well, that's what happens. This news broke about.
We win premierships. It can be a pretty negative place at times, I have to say.
This news broke about. Yeah, go on, George.
If you want to see real spiralling, just head over to Bomber Blitz.
Yeah, well,
they've been doing it for 20 years.
If you want Schadenfreude, go there.
Imagine, I got a mate who a big Bombers fan, and we both lamented after the Saturday night, but they kicked 1-9 in the last quarter. Good Lord,
that's Melbourne.
At least say there's always Essendon. For as bad as it is for us this year at Demonland, there's always Bombers Blitz, and there's always the Bombers.
Yeah, and I'm sure the same thing will be going over at the Blues at the moment, having lost half their team in one game.
Yeah, absolutely.
That thread on Demonland about track, I started that an hour ago when I heard the news, and it's now up to 131 posts within an hour. So if you want to read about melting down.
129 of them probably saying, yeah, I told you Goodwin's terrible.
Well, there are a lot of those. So stay tuned. Could be a spicy summer. Well, let's talk about this match before we have our spicy summer season review in a couple of weeks. In another nail-biting encounter at the MCG, the Demons fell short by just 2 points against Port Adelaide, effectively ending their already slim finals hopes. Despite leading for the majority of the match, Melbourne was unable to secure the win, suffering their fourth loss of the season by less than one goal. This close defeat underscores a season filled with missed opportunities and near misses, leaving the Demons to ponder what might have been. The match began as a low-scoring affair, with both teams struggling to find the goals in a dour contest. Inaccuracy in front of goal from both teams saw Port ahead by the slimmest of margins at quarter time. The second quarter continued in much the same fashion, with both teams failing to capitalise on their opportunities. By halftime, Melbourne held a narrow lead of 3 points, largely due to the efforts of 𝗍𝗶𝘀𝗁, who was already proving to be the D's standout player. The third quarter saw the Demons maintaining their slim advantage, with Pickett again at the forefront, kicking his third goal for the night. And Melbourne's defence, despite missing key player Stephen May, held firm against Port Adelaide's advances. And heading into the final term, the Demons still held a 3-point lead, and the game was still very much in the balance. The final quarter was a tense affair, with both teams having chances to seal the game. Melbourne's 𝗍𝗶𝘀𝗁 kicked his fourth goal to put the Demons back in front midway through the quarter, and the D's had their chances to put the game away, but for missed opportunities from a missed set shot from rookie Colton Tolstrup and a wayward snap from Jack Billings. In the dying minutes, Quinton Narkle, who had been subbed into the game, kicked what would ultimately be the match-winning goal. And despite Melbourne's best efforts, including a late surge that saw them camped in the forward half, they were unable to find a decisive goal. The Power held on to win by just 2 points. 𝗍𝗶𝘀𝗁 was one of the D's best players, almost single-handedly keeping them in the contest. He finished with 21 disposals, 8 score involvements and 4 goals, a performance that highlighted his importance to the Demons forward line. His midfield bursts added a dynamic element to Melbourne's play, but ultimately it wasn't enough to secure victory. And despite carrying injuries, both Gawn and 𝗍ine put in heroic efforts, continually willing themselves into contests. Gawn, in particular, reinforced his All-Australian credentials with another commanding performance in the ruck, showcasing his superior aerial ability and leadership. Melbourne coach Simon Goodwin lamented his team's inability to capitalise on their dominance during the crucial moments of the game. Post-match, he said, "We had opportunities, especially in the middle part of the last quarter, but we couldn't hit the scoreboard. The Demons were competitive throughout, but lacked the finishing touches required to secure victory in close games. The loss marks a disappointing end to a season that promised much but delivered little in terms of finals contention. The Demons now face 2 difficult final games against Gold Coast and Collingwood, but their focus will likely shift to planning for next season." Ben, George, you want to add anything before we get into the meat and potatoes of the show? No?
I'll save my thunder.
All right. Yep. All right. Let's get into...
I'll just add
sure.
a few little things. What Goodwin said really sums up the whole game. You've got to have the players who can execute. We don't have those players. We've spoken about it all year, about the kicking ability in at critical times. I think we had 20 more clangers than the opposition. So if you keep handing the ball to the opposition, it's not surprising what happens in the end. We'll talk more about the game plan a little bit down the track, but got the same problem with the game plan and how the game plan can possibly be executed when you've got all sorts of people out of position. You've got players who aren't ready yet to be playing AFL, but are having to. There's all sorts of things that just aren't working for us for the moment. But in the end, it was great that we got within a couple of points in this game. But in the end, what we just said, we had players who couldn't execute when they had to execute.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Ben Man, we've got nothing from the Pearl this week in terms of having a go at you and your stats files. So take it away with the stats files for the game against the Power.
No worries. And just before I jump into the stats file, there was wanted to give a pump up for Goody. I thought it was a really good coaching performance. There was a comment in a post-game thread by Pipefitter, a poster called Pipefitter, and his comment was, apart from the diabolical sub-decision, and he notes they can't wait for that rule to be scrapped for Goodwin's sake, which there's a question about that I think I've got, Andy. This was a good coaching display. We denied the corridor to them. To Port and nearly pulled off an epic win with plenty of VFL standard players running around, was Pipefitter's comment. And he was spot on, I thought. On the board, they show the players at quarter time that I've talked about a fair bit this season. In the section under reinforcement solutions, they had the word corridor at quarter time as one of the words on the board. Along with pressure rating 1.83, which is, it's actually 183 is what they put on telly, but they do that pressure rating in decimal, so 1.83. Conquest and conquest and contests. They were the reinforcements, the word. So corridor, presumably corridor was to reinforce what was a clear strategy in that first quarter to deny Port the corridor, which I thought was a really smart play. I'm not really sure what sort of some posters on Demonland expect, particularly those who don't rate the list, the playing list, the players, or the coach in terms of the result, getting within 2 points of that team. And I just figured that sort of that phrase I said before, perspective wouldn't go astray sometimes. Most posters, I think, and most Demon fans, realistically, you'd have to say probably expected we'd get flogged in this game. As did the punters. We started that game adrifting $3.10, so that's probably as long as we've been for a while. We're clearly cooked. There's no doubt about it. In my mind, to my eye, I'll be not surprised at all if we learn postseason. There's multiple players carrying significant injuries, including, I think, 4 of our best players, Lever, Gawn, Viney and Clarry, and on Clarry's hands clearly causing him obvious issues, and not to mention his fitness. I mentioned before that we were crook. There seemed to be suggestion that multiple players were crook, including JVR and Clarry, and really, really ill, potentially with COVID. We've lost lots of players, obviously, with Smith and Gus. We're missing, if you include those two, we're missing 6 of our best 23, 7 if you include Spargs, one of whom is arguably the best player in the AFL in track, and another is arguably the best key position defender in the AFL in Steve May. So, 7 of our best 23 not on the park on Saturday night. So more than a quarter, almost a third of our best 23 and half of our best 6 players, I'd argue. So Gus is or was in my top 6. As Pipe Fitter suggested, those players, AFL players, over 700-800 games of AFL football, multiple All-Australians, and one of the best players of my of this generation. Those players are replaced by VFL level players. For instance, I love Marty Hall, but he's a VFL standard player, and we saw with some of his kicking. And we're having to play a bunch of kids who are clearly paddling, and we'll talk a bit about this because you can see it clearly as evidence that they're paddling by their pressure rating. I mentioned 3-4 weeks ago that what was super impressive was the leadership being shown by the young players, and that was reflected in they dominated the top 5 of the pressure rating. Well, there hasn't. They're completely fallen off a cliff, the young players, in terms of applying pressure. We're obviously missing track. Gus, Maxi's labouring, Clarry's struggling, so our midfield's struggling. We don't, and as George notes, we just don't have enough players. Particularly, we've never had a strong team, sort of skill wise. I don't think. I honestly think we've lacked good skills across the board for at least 20 years, and it's no different in this Goodwin era. But if you take 6 or 7 of your best players out, and even some of them are, even our best players are a bit hit and miss, to be honest, by foot. But if you take your 6 or 7 best players out, and you're left with players who, probably realistically a VFL standard, then of course you're not going to hit those high risk kicks into the corridor, and you're not going to risk doing it. Nor, they also don't have that ability to make split second elite decision, that sort of high turnover, high transition game that everyone would love for us to be playing demands. And, more crucially, as we'll unpack a little bit, we also lack the all-team running power and speed that transition and turnover game demands. And, we're just not up to it in that space at the moment. We're just not covering the ground, and that was never more evident on Saturday night. So all of that's to say is, Goody went in with a clear game plan, which was deny Port the corridor. And really, in many ways, it was interesting that it was retro round, because we went retro for the last 3-4 years. It was very much, even though we did all right from the back half, as I'll speak to in a minute, but we sort of went back to going down the line, keeping it out of the corridor. We dominated contested marks. We really played a very similar model. We tried to make it a grind, successfully so. And if we chose to play any other way, Port would have absolutely demolished us on Saturday night. They would have absolutely taken us to task. Opposition teams have been looking to run us off our legs and spread us wide for weeks. GWS and Freo being the two best examples, or Dogs as well. And Port are one of the hardest running teams in the AFL from their back half. They're number 2 or 3 in the AFL for scores for the back half. That's their go is back half. They've got fast players in Butters and Horne-Francis. They've got good leg speed. They're as quick a side as the Dogs are. So if we'd allowed that game to become, allowed them to spread and give them the corridor, they just would have torn us apart. And the sort of as a good example of how they would have done it, they scored 148 points the previous week, 148 points doing exactly that, running hard from the half-back flank and spreading against the Swans, who, I think were in a loading phase, so that was a factor. But nonetheless, they scored 148 points. So I thought it was a really impressive coaching performance by Goody to keep Port, who are one of the most offensive sides in the AFL, had, as I noted, scored 101 by 136 points the previous week against the flag favourites. We kept Port to almost a third of that score on a perfect night for footy, with VFL for standard players running around, a bunch of kids, multiple players who will need post-season surgery, a team who's collectively gassed, and as I said, by many accounts that I believe, we're multiple players really sick. 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝘁𝗃 and 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝘁𝗃, Jags with that. They were both out with illness, weren't they, those two players? And there were reports of JVR. I had my binoculars on JVR and Clary coming off, and they both look sick at his dog. And one of posters, Jaded No More, on who's probably now become jaded again, on Demonland, said that she sits behind the interchange bench as well, and that Clary was vomiting and had snot coming from his face. So
probably something to do with the punches in the stomach he kept getting all game long as well.
Don't get me started. And is the fella ever going to get a free kick again?
Obviously not.
It's unbelievable. So all of that, so it's a bit of a long rant, but all of that was to, Goody gets a lot of stick, and I thought it was a really excellent coaching performance from Goody tactically, and they really had no way of cracking that. We were lucky to hang on. They were going hard at us. So I thought it was a fantastic performance, a really brilliant performance by the team in terms of their effort levels, and by Goody in terms of his ability to motivate the team. We're out of the finals. He got them up, sickness going through the team, and he was able to get them in a place where we almost beat the team that's currently second on the ladder. So if you don't think that was impressive, if you don't think we were impressive, then logic suggests that you don't think Port have got any chance of winning a flag, and really, realistically, no one thinks that. Although I don't think they will, but still, nonetheless, they'll be top 4 and potentially a final at home. So, good work, Goody. He's probably not going to get too many claps on the back, so I thought I would do so. I thought it was retro round, as I said. It felt like we were going back in time. We tried to make it a forward half game as best we could. What's interesting is Port are also a forward half team, so they try to rest it back. So looking at our sort of metrics that have been important in 20, 21, 22 and 23, forward half, we were 61% in the first quarter. We came out firing. Our contest was terrific, 61-39 in that first quarter. They leveled up, then it was 49-51 in the second. We struggled in the third quarter to keep territory, and I thought we did really well to hang into the match at that point. It was 36 to 64% time in forward half, so they dominated that quarter in terms of being able to keep it or get it forward. And then the last quarter was 49-51, so it was a 49-51 split for time in forward half. Metres gained, we're 143 down, but it wasn't for want of trying. As I said, they really like to get it forward and keep it forward. Inside 50s, we were down 8. Just picking up George's point, this sort of, you can really see it in the numbers. Disposal on a night where, it was a 2 points, we turned it over the ball a lot, and the disposal efficiency overall, so kicking and handballing, was 65 to 73, so 8.4%. So that's a significant gap, but the kicking efficiency is the one that drives me bananas every week. So it was 61.5 to 69.5, so the percent, the kicking efficiency, and it just continues to be an issue for us. We've tried to address it, over the last few years. I've talked about it, but it continues to be an issue.
I think I saw at halftime we were 50% disposal efficiency.
Yeah.
1 out of every 2 disposals goes to the opposition effectively, or doesn't go to our players. It just keeps coming up.
And I don't know about you, George. Lever doesn't look right to me. He's another player. Won't be shocked if he's got an injury, and he coughed it up twice. There were just two by Marty Hoare, one which remarkably we were damn lucky it didn't score. Cost us a goal, but we had the ball on our half forward line, had control over the ball, and Marty Hoare misses like a 30 metre or less, a 25 metre basic kick, to no one, under no pressure, and you just can't give the ball up like that. It didn't ended up.
There were plenty of examples. T-Mac had a horrible at one point, but when you're 50% in half a game of football, it's not just 3 players. It's across the whole board.
Yeah, exactly, and it was. I mean, I don't, can't be too hard on the young fella, but Colt didn't look confident lining up for that goal. I really wish that, I think it was Fritter who was in the frame to mark it. And
he should,
Or 𝗍𝗲 could have kept on going and played on. And so, like how often have we said that we've lost the game because of our accuracy? And this was another one where we really should have, well, we had the opportunity to put them under pressure. Mind you, they missed some pretty gettable shots too, didn't they? So
yeah.
But let's go through the blueprint. As I said, it wasn't really in many ways, it was a throwback to Goodie's style, and that's why I give him a lot of credit for saying, well, let's just crack in and make it really difficult for them. Let's go, let's play like a team that we're playing a better team than us, and that's we've had plenty of Roos's first 2 seasons. Basically that was his strategy at Melbourne. So to keep that side to 53 points is quite remarkable. I'll say it again. They scored 146 points just the previous week against the team who are now favourites to win the flag. And so 100, that's extraordinary. It was a perfect night for footy. There was no frost or no dew. It didn't seem like the ball wasn't slippery. To keep aside to almost a third of the score that they scored the previous week was super impressive, particularly given we had Steve May out and, they have a reasonably strong forward line. Georgiadis was out, but I think Marshall didn't play last week, so he was a direct in.
That's right, yeah.
But
he didn't last long.
No.
Yeah.
No. I thought one of them, from a defensive thing, though, they had shots per inside 50, 46 point, almost 50% of the time, 46.4% of the time they got inside 50, they had a shot at goal. So to our 39.6. Our intercept game was a bit better, so we've improved that. Not so much against the Doggies, but 80 intercepts to 78. We had three less intercept marks than them, 14 to 17. And I actually thought that was a really big factor. That goes to your point, George, about us kicking it to the opposition. But it's not just kicking it directly to the opposition. It's that skill that we've talked a lot about, is just not kicking it to our forwards' advantage. Marks inside 50, I've always had this in defence, but from a defensive aspects, they took 13 to our 7. Inside 50, I don't know contested marks inside 50 because we had more contested marks than them. So a lot of them might have been, it seemed to me they didn't get deep as often as we did. So some of those marks might have been up around the 50 that we were giving up. But I thought we defended ball movement from Port's back half really well. So as evidenced by, I'll dig into this a bit more detail, but we only gave up 7 points from the back half, from their D50, not from the back half. From our defensive 50, we only gave up 7 points, and that's against a season average of 13.1 points. And they, as I said, that's their whole go. They're the just about probably Swans maybe match them, the best team in the AFL at moving it from their back half, and could only score 7 points from their D50. We average giving up 32.3 points a game from the opposition score against us from their back half, only 28 in this game. Although 28 is almost half their score, it just shows that's how important it is to their method. So I thought we defended their ball movement really well. And again, a lot of credit must go to Goody for his tactics and the way he frustrated their ability to transition the ball quickly. They don't switch it as much as Giants and Port. They're a very straight line team, very much like us in 20 to 23 in that respect. And so I thought Goody, going into the game, he knows that obviously. I thought he had a really good night in the box. Contested possessions, this is just a remarkable number. So 160 contested possessions to 130 plus 30. Just a reminder of what they include: hard ball get, loose ball get, contested mark, ruck, hard ball get, gather from hit out, freeze, contested knock on. They're what make up contested possessions. 30 more than Port is amazing. So you cannot knock the player's effort. You can, and to be honest, I don't really come at knocking their skills. You either got the skills or you don't. You can't magic it up, but you can knock it when their effort levels and their ability to apply pressure, and you couldn't do so this week. 160 to 130 plus 30. I don't know. I haven't looked, but that would be one of our highest differentials for the season. So enormous effort. Just drilling down on that a little bit, inside the defensive 50, hardball get, we were +3. Gather from hit out +4. We had 5 more frees inside our defensive 50, were handy. In our forward 50 +3 for hard ball gets. We had 1 more contested mark than them inside our forward 50. So just looking there, they didn't take any marks inside forward 50. So that defensively, that's excellent given Stevie May wasn't in the team. This is where I thought was terrific effort in our forward half in the contest. Hardball gets, we were +3, 7 to 4, and we just took the 1 contested mark inside our forward 50. Post clearance, particularly in the model that we sort of went back to, which is, grind it in contest, get it forward. We were, post clearance, Hardwick often talked about this being the most important statistic in footy. We were +10 for hardball gets post clearance, which really goes to show the effort that we put in. This was super impressive. I wish some of these marks could have been inside 50, but nonetheless, we were +7 for contested marks post clearance, which is super, super impressive by any measure. Absolutely. So, and pre-clearance +3 for hardball gets. Pressure, again, you can't, it was terrific effort by the fellas in terms of the team, in terms of the effort they brought, the intensity. Team pressure, we opened 182 to 194. So, the fact that we were able to be in the game despite being down 12 on the pressure really, goes to show our effort level. We fell away in the second quarter. Goody would have been really frustrated with this, 154 to 162 in that second quarter. He's no doubt given them a spray at halftime, and they've come out and 199, remembering 200's considered elite in the third quarter, to 185, so +14 in that quarter for pressure. And in the last quarter, we couldn't maintain the rage. There's bit of talk about sort of where our fitness is at. And this is a good example of 2 teams going in different directions. Our last quarter was pretty good. 180 is considered average. We're 182. But here's the difference. They were able to go up a gear and apply their pressure rating in the last quarter was 204. So we were down 22 pressure points in the game. And that's it. That's the game done and dusted there. So 179 to 186 was the match. Just for context, we were 172 last week for pressure. So it wasn't actually much different to last week in terms of the pressure we applied across the match. It's just that we couldn't, we just couldn't get it done in terms of our kicking, really. Most pressure point, I mentioned this Just a reminder, pressure points are the 𝗦liche𝗰𝗶𝗹 pressure acts. Physical pressure acts are worth 3.75, and that's basically when you touch them, tackle them, the opponent. Closing acts, 2.25 points. Chasing acts are 1.5, and corralling 1.2. I mentioned that, there was about a block of 3-4 weeks post-bye where it was the young players who dominated the stats for pressure acts and pressure points, but they've really fallen away, which is absolutely no surprise. It's, it is a really tough gig, and history shows us that young players struggle as they get towards the end of the year. Hands off to this fella, and I'll talk about him in a little bit after I run through the stats. But 𝗍𝗲𝗃𝗀𝗁 Pickett had 25 pressure acts. His season average is 43.7 points. He had 57 pressure points in this game, so he topped both the pressure points and the pressure acts. This was after he got a serve from Kane Corns, who's during the week, and I think someone else. There was another commentator who knocked 𝗍𝗲𝗃. Just a phenomenal performance, really. The pressure was just one aspect of his performance. Nibbler in second, 24 pressure acts. They should just close the 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝗁𝘀 right now and just give it to Nibbler. He's been our best player this year.
Kidding, right? He's up there, but he's not going to win the 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝗁𝘀. Max has got.
He's going to win the 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝗁𝘀. He's no. They just give it to Nibbler just because
I'd give it to Langdon.
To Langdon. Well, Maxi will win it.
Yeah, but I'd give it to Langdon.
Langdon, you're right. Langdon has been fantastic, but Nibbler, I reckon there's probably, just off the top of my head, there'd be 3 games where he hasn't been in our top 5 pressure for the whole season. His effort level is such he's beyond heart and soul now, and I think his game's improved, his decision-making's improved, his kicking's improved. But just a phenomenal performance. This will surprise some people. 𝗟𝗏 was third, pressure points, 22 pressure acts, 52 pressure points. His season average is 46.3. So despite completely falling off a cliff in the last quarter, and we'll get to I would have subbed him, I think. That's a fantastic performance. Harrison Petty, I thought he had his best game for the season. 18 pressure acts, first time he's been in the top 5. 50 pressure points. His season average is 30.7. This is senior players standing up when they need to. Jack Viney was next. 19 pressure acts. Kay Chandler, Ed Langdon, Tom Sparrow, Trent Rivers. So the first young player or first or second year player was was Colt at in 11th. So the first 10 players in terms of our pressure, most pressure points, were all of our senior players. The young players are struggling, and probably the end of the season can't come quick enough for them. Ground ball gets, here's another number, just shows how hard we cracked in and the effort levels that we applied. Plus 10. For ground ball gets. Tackles 60 to 62. Tackles inside 50, 18 to 6. Plus 12. I wasn't surprised at all when I saw the numbers that JVR was the person selected to sub, but he, because he, as I said, he looked crook. He didn't lay a single tackle, so 18, I suspect 18 tackles inside 50 would be close to a season high for us. It was disappointing he wasn't able to lay one of them, but I'll give him definitely an out in terms of being crook. So plus 6 for tackles inside 50. This was interesting. Clearances last week, we were down 2 centre clearances. These are all totals, and down 2 stoppage clearances. This week, people might think, well, we did much better this week in clearances. We were down 1 for centre clearances and down 3. So down 4 both weeks last week in terms of raw numbers. We had 3 more hit-outs. We had 6 more hit-outs to advantage. And just in terms of the other contest, one that I look at every week, contested marks, and this was really, in some respects, that retro style that Goody likes, is marking strong down the line. We took 13 contested marks. I think I mentioned that 1 was inside 50, so 12 around the ground contested marks. A couple of really good marks by Petty, and a brilliant clunk of a mark by Turner, which was just down below me. And I swear I could hear it hitting his hand. It just sounded fantastic. So he really, really grabbed that ball. That's an impressive number, 13 to 6, given it's probably one of their strengths, contested markings. Port, they've got a number of good marks in the team. This was interesting points from defensive half. Even though we were playing that forward half football, we had our season average for points from defensive half is 31, and we scored 37 in this game. Points against, so we kept them to 28. Our season average is 32. Keeping in mind that they're probably the best in the AFL behind the Swans for moving it from their back half. When we were able to move the ball from our defensive 50, we were lethal. We launched an inside 50 from 24% of our rebounds at scoring. We scored 5 goals straight from those chains. However, in the last term, we just couldn't run. We were running up and down on the spot, and it was like watching a slow motion car crash in some respects. In the last term, we were only able to launch 1 inside 50 from 12 defensive 50 chains, and were unable to score from any of them. So we scored 5 goals from inside 50s rebounds in the first 3 quarters, 5 straight, and couldn't score in the last quarter. Score sources. This week we got a goal from kick-in. I could not believe it when I saw this. They got 3 goals from kick-in, so 18 points. What's that? Almost a quarter of their score, more than a quarter of their score from end to end, which again probably shows that doesn't happen when you can't follow them. We couldn't keep up a couple of times when they brought the ball up quickly from the back half. Centre bounce, this is footy to an extent, but we scored 1 point from centre bounce after scoring none last week. I wonder if in the history of the Melbourne Football Club, it's been a long time since in 2 weeks footy that we've scored 1 point in total from a centre bounce. They only scored 2 points, so we were only down 1. And stoppage around the grounds, this was partly a function, to be honest, of their inaccuracy. 6-2-38 to 3-8-26, but plus 12. Sorry, what am I talking about? That was all last week, plus 51. So go through, forget all of that. This week, plus 6 for kick-in. We scored on the kick-in. We were -8 for centre bounce, 139. We only scored 1 point, so that was right. So last week, 1 point. This week, 1 point. So 2 points in 2 weeks from centre bounces, which still my point probably true. I don't think that's ever happened. Plus 2 from stoppages around the ground this week. So overall, from our stoppages, we were -8 for centre bounces and plus 2 for stoppages. So -6 overall. So we actually did better last week from stoppages than we did this week. We were plus 11 last week, and this week we were -6. So it's a 3-goal differential in terms of our stoppage work this week to last week. Probably not helped this week by Clarry just not being able to run, it looked like, in that last quarter. This was the big difference, though. Last week we gave up 51-point differential, 9-10-64 to 2-1-13 on turnover. This week it was only -2. They scored 4-6-30 on turnover and 4-4-28 we scored. And as I said, that really was a big function of the game plan that Goody went into the game with. Season average centre bounces 8.7 points and 7.4 against, and they scored 9. So we did all right in terms of minimising the damage, but the key one was our stoppage, our scores from turnover, 28 to 30 for only a 2 differential. Again, I've mentioned it before, from our D50, we average 15 points a game from our scoring from our score chain start from our D50. We doubled that and scored 30, which is super impressive. And for the same scoreline, we averaged 13. The opponent's 13.1, and then 13.1, and they could only score 7 from their D50 in this game. So we really did better than them from moving it from deep on the ground. And so that's a real positive. Just finally, just a final point about the match rating. There's Swooper 1987, another poster on Melbourne, on Demonland, noted that after the game on Saturday night, Gawn is the 4th highest rated player across the season, behind only Bontempelli, Cripps and Rankin. He's just behind Rankin. It's Gawn's best individual rated season since his back-to-back Bluey years of 18 and 19. He's 10 places higher in those ratings than Zeri. Swooper notes he's a remarkable player, which I fully 100% concur with. And in this match, last week as well, but he was clearly struggling. He just can't get up off the ground at the moment. He can't leap. Maxi, I mean, he scored.
Did you see his ankle that he posted online, I think last week after the Bulldogs game? It was big and purple.
Yeah.
He's
What's
obviously
that, 3 weeks after the injury,
Yeah.
4 weeks after the injury? Yeah, so he scored. So keep it just sort of for context. 20 in the AFL, in these player ratings, and I've pumped them up as a good measure before, 20 is considered an elite game of football. In this game where 𝗪cie was clearly underdone, and I tell you what, if I was Goody, I would not be able to maintain my calmness, because we've got to do something off-season about the treatment that clubs give 𝗟𝗀, and in particular Port. They do it week in, week out. They target him physically. I just lost my lolly at the game. They've got to protect him. I mean, he's one of the greatest players of all time. They've just got to do a better job of protecting him, because they were smashing him the entire game. His player rating for this game was 30. 30. What a phenomenal game of football. Disposal efficiency, 86.4. He had 22 disposals, 3 inside 50, 15 contested possessions. He had 6 clearances himself. He took 5 marks, 3 contested marks, 4 intercept marks. He had 177 Supercoach points. Extraordinary. You could only get 6 coaches' votes out of all of that, which was amazing. 30 is an unbelievable game. I'll find it out before next week podcast, but I suspect there's probably only a handful, maybe a dozen games. I don't know. I'll have a look. 20 maybe of any player in any game scoring 30 points in a game this season. And for context, we'll talk a bit about 𝗪𝗀𝗀 later, but he had a game. He was the second. So 𝗪cie was the highest rated player on the ground, 30 flat for his player rating. His predicted rating coming into the game was 15.4, so double that predicted rating. 𝗪𝗀𝗀 was way back, but he had a brilliant game as well, 21.2. He got 7 coaches' votes. The highest rated player for Port was Zach Butters on 15.9, and then Horne-Francis, Rosie, Boak, Brandon 𝗟𝗏𝘀𝗁, and then Jack Viney. And I was a bit surprised at this, actually. Colt was our next rated player at 11.5. Much better game than I probably would have guessed, but, I just fully concur with that comment from Swooper. I think, it'll be a dark day when he finally retires in terms of just a legend of the Melbourne Footy Club, 𝗪cie Gawn, and I just wanted to give him a massive shout-out.
How in the hell did 𝗟𝗏𝘀𝗁 get any votes?
Let's have a look. How did he get any votes? He had a player rating of 13.2. He didn't get a vote. But he was on the ground. You'd like this 100% of the time.
Yeah.
He had 15 disposals, metres going 266.
What's his disposal efficiency? It's usually about 5%.
66.7. He had 10 contested possessions. He had 10, led them for ground ball gets with 10. He had 9 intercepts, so we kicked to him a lot. That's probably that answers your question.
Yeah, that's the answer between him and Aaliyah.
Yeah. So, amazing performance by 𝗪cie.
Well, if Track was listening to this podcast, he's got no worries. He'd be more than happy to stay.
I'll go speak to him if you like.
I think he needs some positive binners.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into the listener question part of the program. Lazy says, the players looked pretty confused with the game plan. Shh, don't Track, stop listening from now. The players look pretty confused with the game plan right now, and in this game, we defaulted to players gravitating to the boundary. We aren't what we were when it comes to repeat stoppages. We needed to be bold and to take the game on more throughout the middle. I hope we stick with what we were trying to develop earlier in the year. Teams need a good transition game at the moment, and I'm confident this method, while keeping elements of the old one, will bear fruit. 𝗟𝗀𝗀𝘀𝗁 replies, I think they executed the game plan brilliantly. We actually could have won the game if we had kicked straight in the fourth quarter. How were we that close? Brilliant plan, brilliant execution. Doug Reamer replies to 𝗟𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 saying, spot on. We shut down a side that had just beaten top of the ladder by 100 plus points. Those critical of Goodwin won't give him any credit for this. It was a masterstroke of coaching. Those wanting us to bite off more 45-metre angle kick-ins, may I remind you of T-Mac's direct turnover off half-back. Spider-Gonica says, hi team, we've talked a lot about our lack of foot skills. When you see teams like Collingwood, Freo and Port nail those ambitious, often through the centre field kicks so well, along with their leg speed, how do you see the future of our game plan? Obviously, it's hard to change a game plan. It becomes so ingrained and habitual. Goody has been shifting the dial this year. But is there an interim style for us that will work to get back into the top four, the hybrid red and blueprint, or are we transitioning to the full Monty as per those clubs as we refresh our list? Or should we be looking at the next innovation? Radish D says, did I travel back in time? The game felt exactly like the final against Carlton last year. A hard-fought, brutal contested game. Our pressure and contested ball were good. Poor discipline taking away shots at goal. Each of our goals felt like it took 4 times the effort of theirs. Had chances to put the game away in the fourth quarter, but didn't take them, lose by under a kick. I think this game underlies why the game plan needed to shift this year. We don't have the forward line to kick goals in a congested forward 50. We need to change to a transition game plan so we can use the players we do have to score in an open forward line. Unfortunately, we don't have the midfield players and defenders to execute it. This year was a tough one, but next year we could come back. The gap from worst to first in the AFL is pretty small at the moment. Thinking ahead, should we move beyond the transition game to whatever game style will be after that? Get ahead of the pack. What will be the game style to defeat the transition game? Can we rebuild into that more easily? And finally, D Future says, hi boys, thanks for the podcast. Is it really a simple game? No team has a team of elites, and our versatility and pace where we should be heading in 2025, multi-skilled tools and faster running players. What should be the game plan if contest and defence is too hard? Now, look, any changes that we made to our game plan over the pre-season, they were initially hindered by the medical retirement of Angus Brayshaw and then hampered even further by the interrupted pre-season and fitness issues of Oliver, then waylaid by the injuries to Salem and Petraka. The midfield makeup that we have now is vastly different, and the game plan has no doubt needed to be tweaked and adjusted on the fly, as we've all seen. And I'm sure, B-Man, you're going to have some thoughts on this. But before we hear from him, George, what are your thoughts on our current game plan and any future plans that it might evolve into?
It was very, very noticeable, as Bin Man's already pointed out in all these statistics. This was a Ross Lyon, John Longmire game plan that was employed in this game. This was a case of if you haven't got the cattle, and we don't have the cattle, and Lyon and Longmire in the past have not had the cattle, you just strangle the game.
Like Roos I'd add too.
Roos, and particularly when he came to us, strangle the game and hope in the hell that you stay in the hunt towards the end, which is exactly what happened in this game. We lost by 2 points. Port, as Ben Man has noted, and everybody else has seen, kicked 140 points or whatever last week, and we've held them, just strangled them down to where they were. Our problem is that at the moment, as everybody knows, because we're missing all these players of talent, is we haven't got the players who can execute. In order to run the transition type of game, you've got to have the players who can execute. We just don't have them on the field at the moment. We're playing young kids who are barely started out their career, who just haven't, it takes a couple of years to get them up to a suitable level. A classic example of that was 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝘁𝗃. Did nothing in his first 2 years. All of a sudden comes out, and he because he develops into that capability that comes from just getting experience. So this was a dramatic change from the game plan that we started off the season with. The other thing is that because we're missing various players, particularly the backup ruck, someone for Max, we lose Petraka out of the middle. All we've been doing is filling people into the holes that they're not familiar with and areas that they're not trained for, particularly to execute the game's plan. So we've got 𝗠𝗲𝗀𝘁𝗁 playing in the mid. We've got JVR and Petty in the ruck. We've got Rivers in the mid. We've got McVie playing mid now. We've got Petty being pushed forward. We've got Clary at half forward. We've got A and B in the mid. We've got Salem in the mid. And then to top it all off, we throw people like Hoare and Tomlinson into the back line because we've got no one else. You can't execute a game plan because you need the successful teams that get to the grand final are the ones who are able to execute their game plan because they've got players 20 players who have been there providing the stability, the surety and the connection with the other players on the field. So at the moment, our situation is pretty dire simply because of the circumstances that have evolved during this season. But this was a great game for us in our ability to be able to, like I said, shut the game down, strangle it, keep it on our terms. We're pushing it out to the wings to keep it away from the corridor, playing it down the line with surety. That just denies the opposition the opportunity. But you don't get playing that style of game doesn't win you premierships. Sydney have won one since their last premiership was 2012. Ross Lyon has never won a premiership. So between the two of them alone, nearly 25 years of playing AFL football, and they've won one premiership. So if you want to win premiership, you can't play the strangle game. It just doesn't get you there. It doesn't get you there over the line in the end. It might get you there into the finals on regular basis, but you don't win. You've got to be far more daring for that, and that's the game plan that we normally employ.
Well summed up, George. And I think that just a couple of things I'd add is you watch come finals. Is that the sort of the funny thing that's developing with footy is that it's always been sort of two seasons, the home and away and then the finals. But I think that it's even more the case these days. And come finals, under pressure, it'll be the style of that hard cracking in pressure and contest that is the key element of all game plans, but that it goes to the fore. So, for me, this year's got really strong 2019 vibes about it, where Goody retooled the method that got us to the prelim in 2018, which really is interesting in terms of sort of looking back on that season. We were the Hawthorn-style aggressive ball movement. We were transitioning quickly from the back half. That was the way we played, but Goody recognised with probably a combination of the list and where the game was going with the emphasis and importance of high pressure, of extreme pressure. That's what wins finals, is extreme ability to apply extreme pressure and also be able to stand up to extreme pressure. That's what you get in the big games in finals. It's also why in games you get lots of rubbish games in finals, because one team gets blown out because they can't handle that pressure. So come finals, a lot of this sort of fast ball movement that everyone loves to see will just disappear, just like it did with the Pies last year. They completely sort of changed their method. I personally think there's a little bit of a confusion, like there's a little bit of a conflation of the turnover game and transition game. Port play a transition game from the back half, which is why it was so impressive, our ability to stop it. But as you noted, George, about Melbourne, I mean, all clubs have systems focused more now than they ever were, I think. Goody's still on that end of the scale, but so's Hinkley. Hinkley's very system. He's got a very strong belief in their system, which is why Goody was probably able to predict. They never looked to switch the ball and spread us the way the Giants and Freo did, because it's not their game plan. So they're not going to go away from their game plan at this stage of the year, and they didn't. I actually think we're not well positioned, even with our best players in, for that sort of high risk turnover game, because even with our very best players in the team, our best 23, we're still a bit suspect by foot. Clary track is a bit hit and miss. Viney's improved, Viney, but still hit and miss. Max, yeah, exactly. So our four best players are all, you wouldn't really say elite. I mean, all of them, particularly track, can certainly hurt. I mean, he was, as I said, number one for score involvements in the AFL by country mile, probably close to it still being number one, even the number of weeks he's been out. But our list isn't being great in terms of skill. And I think that Goody this year will look back on it very much like 2019 and transitioning. We've got Windsor in with his foot skills. We got Laurie, I don't know whether he'll make it, but he was definitely brought in for his foot skills. We got Spargs, who I think has been a much bigger out than people have given it credit for because of his neat kicking inside 50. We obviously targeted Colt partly because of his foot skills. I wish he showed at least done that kick for goal where that he missed. He didn't look confident at all. So there's no doubt that Taylor and the recruiting team in Lamb have gone out and they're looking for high skilled kicks. From my end, we'll get into it at the end of the season. But it's not midfield where we need to be targeting. We need to be targeting players like Houston or, Cummins for GDR boys who have been linked to that can run off the halfback flank and can dispose of the ball effectively. So I think that is in some ways a bit of a transition team. But all of that aside, come finals, the teams with the bulls in them will be the teams that win. And that conflation of transitioned game, the turnover, as I noted, Hoyne talks about it all the time. 17 of the last 18 teams have been number 1, 2, or 3 in points from turnover. But turnover is about putting pressure on the opposition and making it cough it up and getting it back off them. It's not just about, they're often conflated, the turnover and transition game, and I do it as well. But you can turn the ball over in your front half. Port do an excellent job of turning it over in their front half. I think they're number 1 in the AFL for doing so. That turnover game is all about pressure, and come finals, it's all about pressure. So I think it's tough. We, in many ways, good ones team, if you can just play finals, that model works, but you've got to get there and you've got to get top 4. And to do that, I think that sort of fast movement from the halfback flank is key. And, it depends a little bit who we can bring in, I think, whether we'll be able to execute it. But we're 100% behind the 8 ball, I think, in terms of being able to execute that model, partly because of what George noted, and we've been banging on it for ages, our sort of average foot skills across the board. I think, George, we've really missed Salem since he hasn't been as impactful as he was in 21, and same with Bowie, that we've really missed those 2 players' ability to hit targets from the back half. McVie offsets that a little bit. But, we really need Salem and Bowie playing their very best football and hitting targets because we struggle when they don't. The other thing that I think we've struggled a bit in recent times is T-Mac having to go one-on-one. He was playing almost as like a floating halfback flanker, and it takes that aspect of his game away when he's playing one-on-one.
And we've lost Rivers effectively from the halfback line as well.
Lost Rivers from the halfback line. Was Bowie a late out?
Yeah, Bowie and Woden were both laid out.
Both laid outs.
Yep.
Right. So both were illness. So we obviously missed Bowie in that match for his kicking skills, but.
Let's get into fitness and conditioning. Middle-aged Demon says tonight Saturday night should prove again that the talk about conditioning and fitness is just so overblown. How can we be unfit last week, but this week we magically look fit? It's nonsensical. Within an AFL environment, fitness levels do not vary to the degree that Binman continues to bang on about. Our game plan, inconsistent level of execution of skills and inconsistent effort brought weekly are the main factors. Fitness and conditioning are a minor factor at this level. There's no disputing that. Unless a quarter of your list are missing and the majority of your list are kids that haven't yet had enough pre-season, which is not us. B-Man, what do you have to say to what middle-aged Demon contends about conditioning and fitness not being a major factor in the predicament that we find ourselves in?
I won't prosecute the case. I've probably done enough of that over the last few years. But suffice to say, with all due respect, I think middle-aged Demon is wrong, just flat wrong. I'm not surprised. Football media, that's obviously one of my pet hates is how, the shallowness of the analysis in the football media, which is dominated by a bunch of middle-aged ex-footballers. So, it's no surprise really that Joe Public are sort of playing catch up on the importance of or the significance of fitness. But really, I think that, there's a couple of things that are wrong there that, fitness levels do not vary to the degree that I think or that I bang on about is just flat wrong. You can see it week to week. You can see teams that are fit. You don't need to be a sports scientist to see Melbourne struggle to come up after the bye. You don't need to have a degree in it to be able to see that. And I think the other team that's struggling at the moment is Carlton. I know that they had some extraordinary injuries on the weekend, but what was really interesting is Hawks looked to do exactly to us what GWS and Freo did, which is spread and run and just make them chase tail, which says to me that other clubs know Carlton are struggling. Other clubs know we're struggling, which is why they've used that tactic against us so effectively. It's really cut us up. All you got to do is go back. Someone put this on Demonland today, and it was a brilliant point. compare this game that we just played to the first time we played Port. Just watch the 10-minute KO mini or whatever of both games to see the impact of fitness levels. They are chalk and cheese. They're so radically different. It's like two different teams. And that's because that Port game was round 2, 3 or 4, something like that. We were at was it 3? We're at the fittest we're going to be all season. And we played like that. We ran them ragged in that game. And to be honest, I'm not quite sure how can we be unfit last week, but this week we look magically fit. I mean, to be honest, maybe we're watching different games because we did not look fit in this game. We absolutely, I saw you at halftime and both of us said the same thing, is the question mark is how far we're going to be able to stick with them, really. I was amazed.
Yeah, so was I.
I was amazed we were still in that game because we were clearly paddling. I watched the players closely through the binoculars, and so it was interesting to hear they were sick. But we multiple players coming off, including 𝗍𝗱𝗀𝗁𝘀𝗁, who looked completely and utterly, gassed. And I think my point, as I noted before, we scored 5 goals in the first 3 quarters from rebounding from our D50 and couldn't score a single goal in that last quarter. And that's because we completely run out of legs. So, it's just not the case that, we magically look fit this week. I mean, I don't know whether middle-aged Demon went to that game, but I don't know what you boys thought, but to my eye, we didn't look a fit AFL team. So my view is very much that if I was to do a proportion, of where it's significant, I'd say the sort of, it would be 25% of your off-field stuff and getting that right. 25% of your list, I would have fitness and sort of injuries in that mix as well, 25%, and then, I maybe even more, 30%. I personally don't rate the coach particularly highly. So 20%, if it was 100% of all the factors go into a thing, I would have fitness up there at 30 and increasing. So for me, I don't think there's any debate about that. So I'm not going to say, I think I'm right, because I think, I am right in this case, but it's really the argument is, where the sort of debate is how much of a factor. Middle-aged Demon says it's a minor factor at this level. I could not disagree more. It's a huge factor. He says there's no disputing that. That's just a nonsense. And, how it can go, how can we be unfit last week and magically look fit? I'll give you an example, and I'm not being smart after the fact here. What did I say after the Swans game, after they got beaten by 148 points to 36 points? I said, back the Swans for the flag, take the 675. And so for any punters out there, I hope you did, because they're now back into flag favouritism. They ran over the top of the Pies, a team that could not run out of their shadow the previous night, albeit it was at night, against Port Power. Could only manage 36 points in a game of AFL football when their opponents kicked 148, came out and beat Pies and kicked the last 5 goals of the game and completely ran over the top of them after they could barely get off the ground in the last quarter of the last week. How else to explain that? And so, for me, of course, there's, fitness is a massive issue. And, I think that the competition's catching up. So I heard on Demonland or read on Demonland, to explain, Hanbury was asked about the Swans' performance, and he said they were loading. They've flogged them on the track. That's what you get, and then they're bouncing against Pies, and I think they'll go on to win the flag, the Swans. So I think that's where I stand, where I land on that question.
Totally agree, Ben. Man, the fitness is. I'd put a bigger factor. I'd be up around the 50% of what's required. And that includes injuries. People forget that it doesn't matter how fast you run. If you haven't got the people who can run on the field, you're not going to get anywhere. I think the other thing that we're starting to see, and you can investigate this further, particularly next year, is I think the fitness staff had prepared teams almost across the board around the mid-season buys.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's been completely stuffed up with the 24 rounds and then buys all over the place, that they haven't been able to get teams fit at the right times. Let's use the word fit at the right times. So we're seeing some extraordinary games outcomes from round to round. even this week, the Bulldogs, who last week, absolutely ran us off our feet,
and
they couldn't move this week. Yeah, they couldn't move this week.
To Burgess's lot. And I knew that they would do, and well, not knew that they would, but I backed in Burgess's that he would have that team up and about, and backed the Crows over 25 points because exactly that factor. And you're right, George, the volatility of scores this year are extraordinary. Like the Carlton game, you saw the impact of fatigue in that game. As soon as you lose 2 or 3 players on the bench, so fair play, they were down, but that gave you a perfect example of how fatigue can impact. Yeah. And the thing about that that I find frustrating that people don't click, and I blame the media for this. Again, those middle-aged ex-footballers whose job is to educate footy fans and just don't do a good job of it, is fatigue. Just like wet weather and wind makes skill execution much more difficult. So if your starting point, as we've already agreed, is a team that are on average kicks, well, fatigue will have a bigger impact on us than, for instance, it would on Port. Of that, there's absolutely no question. And I think that's always been an issue for us because fatigue. I think that's, to be honest, a factor in our inaccuracy because fatigue will stuff around with ability to deliver because the players with the best technique can mitigate the impact of fatigue better. And it's the same, for instance, in golf, in most sports. So, yeah, it's huge. And I think it's interesting if you apply a sort of economic metric to it, like a sort of supply and demand metric to it. Who are the highest paid? The clubs put their money towards getting a flag. So that's why I count the administration as important. CEOs would be right up there. The next lot would be, we'll leave the players out, obviously, in terms of the overall, but the next highest person at the club would be the coach, except it wouldn't be much more than the high performance manager. What do you reckon Burgess is going to go for if he leaves the Crows? So if clubs are willing to invest the sort of money they're investing in their high performance manager and high performance programs, what does that tell you about the importance of fitness? If it wasn't important, they wouldn't be investing in it. So I think the sort of market sort of factors sort of emphasise the importance of it as well.
I think it'll be interesting to keep an eye on Hawthorn. Particularly if they finish up in the finals. I don't think they've done any preparation for finals. I think you've got a whole stack of young players who are up and fit and healthy, and they've got a reasonably full list. I don't think if they do get into the finals that they'll do anything whatsoever because they will get smashed. They will have spent all their tickets beforehand, but they're exciting to watch because they are young and fit, as we say at the moment. Because I don't think they're doing very much work outside playing on Saturday.
And I read somewhere that they went out and got, I think, the guy from Brisbane, is that right? The high performance manager, and headhunted him to get him to the club because for exactly that reason there's significance of fitness. And that's what I think the benefit for the Swans, that's why they got such an advantage, is because they had such a clear advantage on top of the ladder that they could muck around with their program and still get a home final and still finish top 2. So just on Hawks and that question going back one about the game style, I think one of the advantages Hawks has got over us and a real issue for us that Windsor helps and there's some others is a point you've made, George, a lot is leg speed. It's become so important in footy to be able to have speed to get out in front, and those teams are just cutting us up at the moment in terms of just raw leg speed, but that's another sort of fitness factor. And the other thing about fitness and fatigue is it does impact skill execution. It impacts everything. It impacts all aspects. There's not one aspect of footy that isn't directly impacted by your ability to cover the ground. So again, there's no point. This game showed it. If we were running on top of the ground, we would have looked to attack. We shut it down, like George explained so well, because we didn't have the ability to run and sort of stick with them. It's integral to everything, I think.
I can't wait to bottom out, get a couple of priority picks and reload.
Won't be any bottoming him out, Andy. Come on.
Let's move on. Watson11 says it was a great effort overall against Port. I thought Port would be too good, but we really made them earn it. A few things in the last quarter were frustrating. When Narkle tied the scores, was Clary our best matchup for Rosie at the next centre bounce? It was like the GWS game on repeat. Then they ran down the clock too easily at the end. We played a zone like we were 30 points up, not one or 2 points down. They had 9 marks in the last 90 seconds. Last night, Kane Corns on the round so far claimed we are a poorly drilled side in relation to this. We are 1 win and 4 losses this year in close games, and this follows on from the horrendous final against Carlton last year. Does Corns have a point? 𝗍𝗬𝘀𝘁𝗃 says, can we get some comment on the last 2 minutes of the game? Why are we incapable of pressing forward and manning up? Is this a coaching issue? And if so, did it ultimately cost us the game? Bin Man, what are your thoughts on our last quarter and also on our last few minutes of the game and our inability to win these tight contests?
Working backwards to the first thing and sort of, I guess, reinforcing the point I just made of fatigue impacting all aspects of the game. You know, it also impacts decision making. You just don't make as good decisions when you're fatigued. And I think that includes knowing, in the last 2 minutes of games of making clear-eyed decisions. In also pushing up. That was the other factor. It wasn't a matter of not wanting to. You could see that no one could run. I mean, I don't know what it looked like to you, but it felt like that in the stands. Is no one could run across. It's like if you don't have the run in your legs, it's not like you can suddenly, after 120 minutes of football, find some magic button on your vest or something and be able to cover 40, 50 metres quick enough to get across. But so I think, to be honest, that was the biggest factor in not being able to spread across. But I think the question about our performance in the last 4 minutes or so, definitely we've got a lot of data points now to suggest it's been an issue for us. It was an issue for us last year, definitely in the Blues loss, even in that loss where we, the track one where it hit the post or touched or whatever, we didn't manage that last couple of minutes. So I think it's a totally reasonable question. What do you think, George, in terms of our ability to close out games?
It's difficult in this particular case. I'll just go back to what I said in the game plan. You've got to have the players who can execute and with the ability to execute. I noticed in this particular game, they were definitely shot. There were players all over the ground who were shot. Clary couldn't run, but he wasn't the only one. The other thing I think that when you talk about game plan, it's not just what you play on the game. It's about certain circumstances as they arise. Clubs do try out the last 2 minutes being either in front or behind. And it was obvious to me in this game that they didn't transition. They actually, and I suspect the reason was because you've got a whole stack of players like Tomlinson and Hoare and Tolstrup and Billings. No, keep the list going. Who have all been playing down at 𝗚cie most of the time, and not actually playing the game plan. So, you can't do it once in a season, as we might have found out, and using 5 or 6 players who've never executed it. So I remember I was in the third quarter at one stage where we were setting up the defence, and Neal-Bullen had to tell Tolstrup where to stand. Because he's just not used to it. So the last 2 minutes was just another example of that. You've got a whole stack of people who haven't got necessarily the abilities, and they're too young, and it was always going to happen. They're all absolutely shot. It's not surprising.
The other thing I'd add is your point last week about the setups, the structure. I think a big factor this year has been in terms of our setups that, in close games that, magnifies the importance of it, doesn't it? Getting your stoppages right, in the last 2 minutes in close games. And there was another stoppage where, to be critical of Goody is that I would have subbed off Clary. He stopped to a walk, and they put him back at one stage, which maybe you try something, but he's never, even at his very, very best, he's never looked a natural defender. And we gave up 2 goals in a low-scoring game in that period when he went back. And in that last minute, he was on the ball again. You know, I would have had 𝗍𝗲 in there, or maybe 𝗍𝗲 was in that last one. But I thought his lack of ability to sort of accelerate hurt us the previous game, and in this game as well. So they set up, so like, you know, getting territory is in those last minute or two so critical.
Mr. Question that we had on our run sheet, asked, what has happened to the centre square setups and the lack of defensive accountability at stoppages? For a team supposedly built around the maxim of contest and defence, we are losing at the contest and not defending exits. It should be shockingly easy to rectify, but that hasn't happened all season long. So, George, you were critical of our centre square setups last week against the Dogs, and I think even in the GWS game. What did you think of them this week against another quality midfield?
It was completely changed around. It was as simple as that. This was about the just what we've talked about, the game plan in this particular game. It was just shut them down, strangle them at all opportunity, and we did exactly that. Previous week, it was... I haven't seen, like I said, I think I said the previous two, I haven't seen that poor a setup as what we had against GWS and what we had against the Dogs. We had open areas, particularly around the centre square, but also around the ground as well. In this game, we matched them around the ground. We didn't previously. We've done things like not have the extra at the contest because we knew that we could. Usually match it with them. When you've got people like Petrarca in there, you certainly can. But in this game, we matched them everywhere. Around the ground, we were up against their shoulders. Binman's probably got the statistics about contested possessions in the middle and around the ground. I bet you they were pretty much the same or within a reasonable range of each other.
And I think that's a good point by Watson 11 in that question you read, Andy, that Clary on Rosie at the sort of centre bounce was like GWS game and repeat. It's true, you know, after when Knuckle tied the scores, and that's when I thought, well, prior to that, I thought, well, Clary, I'd rather him up forward in that circumstance and even bring just someone with a bit of acceleration into the centre, but. They certainly worked hard at nullifying the stoppages and sort of creating, as you say, George, creating a scrap. But, even when we're playing our best footy, I'd love to see a record in sort of the last 4 or 5 years. I think it is a reasonable criticism of, how we manage when in close games.
This one may explain the last quarter a bit, and I think we've already touched on it. Kiwi D says, we had two players, 𝗍𝗲 and 𝗍𝗲, pull out of the game because of illness prior to the match. Do you think a few of other players were under the weather, perhaps with COVID? Clary, question marks on his fitness due to the interrupted pre-season aside, certainly seemed off the ball. A few others as well. Yes, there are also question marks on our general fitness and ability or lack thereof to run out games. But do you think our lack of run in the last could be put down to illness in the squad? So, George, who I think we've pretty much said this already, can we blame coughing up this game on the illness? Probably running through the squad.
Yeah, why not? We've blamed everything else, so we might as well go for that one. Look, it's a factor. The one thing that tells me that we already know that 𝗍𝗲 and 𝗍𝗲 withdrew late due to illness, although I've heard of illness on the knee in the past and those sort of wonderful injuries. But JVR only played 60% in this game. It was obvious that for someone who's young, healthy and all those sort of things, he was one of the lowest time on grounds across it. And the reason he was subbed was, I suspect, he was completely stuffed. That you would ordinarily, like most of the players on the ground, even the youngest ones, they're playing 70 to 80% of game time as a general rule. This was a real standout, and you wouldn't be taking him off in any case because he's such a good player. So,
and he had no impact in the ruck, no hit outs.
I think over the whole season and this is why we desperately need to find a backup ruck.
Yeah.
We're absolutely destroying this kid, putting him into the ruck against all these gorillas week after week, and then expecting him to go up forward and take marks. Well,
go up forward, take marks, lead, get up the ground and take marks. From kickouts and all that.
Yeah, he's 20, 21 years of age.
When he's just run around in the ruck for 10 minutes.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I hadn't really sort of considered, like just practicing forward at AFL level, because he seems to have developed a little bit of a habit of running underneath the ball. And as I said, only one contested mark inside 50. I know there's a question about it, but the more time he spends in there as a forward, the better his craft is going to be, isn't it? So
it's all this problem that we've got of just robbing Peter to pay Paul all around the ground. We're doing the same with Petty. Throw him into the ruck. It's not surprising he drops off. At least he's a bit older and his body can take it, but not with JVR.
Demonic Final Fantasy says, I'd love to hear your thoughts on 𝗟𝗀𝗰𝗀𝘀 being the sub this week. I know there were late changes which may have had an influence, but it seems a very inflexible choice. My own view is that to have a deep forward as a sub is counterintuitive to the opportunity afforded of a tactical sub. 𝗟𝗀𝗰𝗀𝘀's freshness was seemingly wasted in the overall team objective. That freshness might have been better served by a midfielder where we were always going to struggle against Port. B-Man, your thoughts on 𝗟𝗀𝗰𝗀𝘀 as a sub, and do you agree with Demonic Final Fantasy's contention that a 𝗟𝗀𝗀𝗀𝘀 type player, a deep forward more type player, is the wrong type of player as a sub?
Yes, I do. But it's interesting. Goody's use of the sub in the last 3 weeks has been strange. I understand, I guess, Turner. I'm presuming Turner was cover for Max for 2 weeks in a row, but they didn't use him in that role on either occasion. They didn't rest Maxi. I wasn't sort of sold on. I just don't think it works having a tall, and that's a bit the same question. I mean, Melk is a sort of medium tall. The thing with 𝗟𝗀𝗀𝗀𝘀 I thought was really strange. I thought it was a really poor decision to have 𝗟𝗀𝗀𝗀𝘀 on the bench. If for no other reason, for exactly what we've just been talking about sort of at length, which is, we didn't have enough players with good, let alone elite ball kicking skills. I mean, look at 𝗟𝗀𝗀𝗀𝘀. One of his kicks that he got was he's so elite he can kick it out of the air and hit a target. To have him sitting on the bench and players sort of butchering the ball around the ground, to me didn't make any sense whatsoever. And also, I would have thought the go was to play him on Aliir. That's the role he's been playing, is taking out the opposition's best intercepting defender. It made no sense for mine at all. And I would have much preferred so I agree it was strange, 𝗟𝗀𝗀𝗀𝘀. To me, being a sub didn't make any sense for those reasons. The other thing was that it's not just he's got elite foot skills, he's a senior player. And so, we need every single senior player with, 6, 7 sort of pre-seasons under their belt in that team as possible at the moment. And to me, it just seemed logical to have 𝗟𝗀𝗀𝗀𝘀 start and Colt come on. Colt be the sub and him come on and provide the sort of burst energy. Having said that, Colt played much better than I thought when I sort of looked at his numbers. But I would, or someone else, like maybe Billings come on in the last quarter, and I thought Billings actually had his best game. I thought, he's much maligned and Billings, but I thought he was really excellent for big chunks of it. Of course, he made some mistakes, but he's a bit of a whipping boy. But yeah, I agree. I thought 𝗟𝗀𝗀𝗀𝘀 was a strange decision as a sub. We missed his foot skills. We missed his sort of intercepting and his ability to, his ability to sort of negate, although Aliir didn't really have a great night, did he? It wasn't as if he, dominated, although...
He didn't need to.
He wasn't coming in.
Kick the ball straight to him sometimes.
That's right.
Anything outstanding.
But another hardened sort of senior player just didn't make sense to me. So, hard to even work out what the logic was, really. Yeah. So, I also agree, you want a player on the bench who can play multiple roles, I would have thought. So a sort of 𝗟𝗀𝗀𝗀𝘀, for instance, he can play wing, half back, he can go on ball, I guess, at a pinch.
Yeah, I thought it was a terrible mistake. Not just in retrospect, it just was. Who's the best interceptor in the port side? Aaliyah. And even if Melchem can't run all that much, he can stand alongside Aaliyah and contest. Just stop, bring the ball to the ground. And I think it was.
We set up for a non-running game anyway. We set up for exactly as you said. We were looking to close it down and shut it down. And so Melchem's he does look to have lost a bit of leg speed, doesn't he? But it wouldn't have been exposed because they weren't stretching us in that way. So
and I think it was Melchem only played 20 minutes in the last quarter, which was the other frustrating thing.
Why didn't you bring him on at the end of the third quarter?
Because Fritsch was doing absolutely, completely nothing. So we and just refused to chase other players. But I think it was when Tolstrup got his chance at kicking goal. The reason the ball got to him was because Melchem competed in the air when he had no right to get close to compete. He brought the ball to ground.
I think that's where he kicked it out of the air. That's the one.
Yeah. So that's exactly what we wanted him to be doing, and he's left sitting on the bench, except for the last 20 minutes. So it's just it's just a really poor decision. And I agree with you. You should have had a Woden. Well, Woden wasn't available, but
Billings,
someone who can play multiple roles, because you never know if someone's going to get injured. But here was a chance to have a negating player on their best intercepting player. Why wouldn't you do it?
Chances like I would have rather obvious. I mean, he was in the game by that stage, but he's a player we know who kicks well for goal and he's got good technique and also his leadership on the field in a close game. I mean, he was on in the end. So, I thought that was strange. JVR was no surprise that. JVR was subbed. I would have subbed Clary because he, by the start, even though his effort again was terrific, he looked like he just couldn't move for the last 15 minutes of the game.
And Drew was absolutely negating him all game, including regular punches to the stomach.
And one that was down in front of me. I didn't see it. I didn't see the hit, but I saw him go down afterwards, and he took a long time to get up. He was sucking wind.
Yeah. And it was done in front of the umpire, and the umpire did absolutely, utterly nothing. And I don't think there's been any MRO reports.
I mean, we can't complain about the umpires this week because we got a fair share
we did,
for holding the ball.
And they were dropping the ball or whatever it's called these days, and some of them were right in front of that one of the umpires, number 42 or 45.
What the hell has Clary done to the umpires? There must be he's got a fatwa against him or something, isn't there? He's never going to get a free kick again.
Let's move on because we've still got a lot to get through. El Diablo 14 says, when are we having the conversation about Salem and Sparrow? Do they need to be on our list next year? Farmer replies, of course they do. And Go Lordy answers, Salo is a brilliant distributor. He's had an interrupted season and Sparrow's had a down year, as many young players do. I expect him to bounce back in 2025. Donsky replies to that, Sparrow has never had an up year. So I was actually surprised to see Salem's game questioned here. I didn't think he played too bad considering it was his first game back from a hamstring injury, and given that he hasn't had the best preparation in the preseason and he's had injuries throughout the seasons. Georgia, your thoughts on Salem and Sparrow?
They'll be both on the list next year.
I don't think we can afford Sparrow to go now.
That's basically it. There's 6 players who we can write off our list right here and now who aren't playing, who are out of contract, who are contributing nothing to the side. So that's why Salo and Sparrow will be staying on. Salo, you can't do much. He's had interrupted pre-season. He had 2 injury breaks during the season as well. He's obviously not anywhere near his peak, not surprisingly. And I've said this time and time, we haven't got anybody else down at 𝗪𝗓 to come up. People say, let's drop Clary, let's drop this player. We've got no one else down at 𝗪𝗓 to come in. We're already playing people like Woden and Laurie and Billings, on a regular in and out and maybe basis, but there's no one else there that's going to come up.
I saw Sparrow. I mean, I agree with Saley. He's not going anywhere, but the partly because even if just say there was some thought, well, we'll trade out Sparrow. You're not Saley. You're not going to get anything for Salem. I'm actually have been a bit disappointed with Sparrow's season this year, or perhaps more his level. Like I had hoped, he's a premiership player and 21 was important. I'd hoped I would hope he'd go to a higher level than he's got to, rather than being sort of like a utility role player. What do you reckon? Do you think he has got that sort of next level to go to?
I was hoping that he did, and he just never got to it. So perhaps he doesn't.
Probably not. But
have the opportunity.
But he's not the number 1, 2, or 3 midfielder. No. But you do need a 4, 5, and 6 midfielder these days. And so who do you replace him with? Is he ahead of Laurie? No. I would say so by a lot.
Yeah, he's ahead of Laurie. Yeah. So I was more just speculating, because the thing, I think, of course, he will be there for exactly the reason you point out, George, is like we're not really in a position to be giving away. It doesn't matter whether he's our 4th, 5th best midfielder, but what the point I was going to make, though, is that if we want to go to the trade table, he's the sort of player you give up, because Salem's got there's no value in. We're going to get nothing for a Salem. You get nothing these days for a player at the back half of their career. You get some trade value. Well, for instance, with Houston, if we want him, we're going to have to pay overs. And so a Sparrow, he's a South Australian fella. Yeah, so
is he?
That's the sort of player that you can. That they might look to trade, because he's young. He can go into a midfield like Jordan, like Jordan and Sparrow are about the same sort of level. And Jordan's a regular in the Swan side. So I'm not saying we should trade him. I'm just saying, and I'm a big fan of Sparrows. I'm just saying that if we want to get sort of hardcore in the trading, is exactly the player, the demographic that you need to be prepared to trade out.
All right, there'll be plenty of time for us to talk in our season review about trades and what we're going to do, so we'll keep it to that. Smurf says, I thought 𝗍𝗲 bounced back really well this week after copying criticism from Kane Corns during the week. I know Kane is a serial contrarian and a master clickbaiter, but I reckon he's way off on his assessment of 𝗍𝗲, particularly when you compare him to his contemporary small forwards. Granted, he can be inconsistent, but so too are many small forwards in their formative years of their AFL careers. A poster on Twitter called Footy Degenerate posted some comparison goal stats of some of 𝗍𝗲's small forward competitors and their goal-kicking stats in their first 5 years. Footy Degenerate writes, 𝗍𝗲 Pickett, 155 goals at an average of 1.5. Tom Papley, 146 goals at 1.47. Cyril Rioli, 140 at 1.32. Eddie Betts, 123 goals and at 1.26. And Isaac Rankine, 119 at 1.47. And Charlie Cameron, 104 at 1.23. So at the same time in his career, 𝗍𝗲 Pickett's had 155 and Charlie Cameron's 104. So he's had 51 more goals and at the same time as Charlie Cameron. Footy Degenerate continues. I reckon he's going all right. He's just turned 23 and plays the hardest position on the ground. Could he be moved up the ground more like a Cyril Rioli and get more ball? Sure, he could comfortably do that. Unfortunately, he doesn't have a Buddy Franklin, roughhead, Bruced forward line to give him that luxury. He has one of the worst forward lines around him, so they need to keep him inside 50 and can only be thrown into the middle momentarily. The tall blokes don't have a contest often enough inside 50 to bring it to ground for him, and we have the 5th lowest inside 50 rate in the AFL. Opportunities are scarce. Could he do better? Of course he could, but like all 23-year-olds, their best footy is ahead of them. Let the kids grow, Kane. So, and then who was our poster? Smurf says, what do you guys reckon of the criticism of 𝗍𝗲 by Kane and Footy Degenerate on Twitter's assessment and 𝗍𝗲's response this week? So, Big Man, do you have anything to say to your good mate in the media, Kane, re his critique of 𝗍𝗲?
No, I mean, not really. I'm not going to give any oxygen. I don't mind Kane Corns really at all particularly, but we all know what the model is for him is to say outrageous things, and we talk about it. And in 𝗍𝗲's case, it seemed to work, so I'd be happy for him to give him a rev up before every game. But because I think is it Degenerate? Was that the
Footy Degenerate? He's on Twitter. He's quite good.
Just absolutely spot on. And I think that the key, this is a point that we've discussed a lot, is that it's such a difficult position. Everyone says how hard that position is. And he measures up against any of the best small forwards, exactly as Degenerate's point made. And, he's you got to pinch yourself sometimes and remind yourself how good footy can be and how, good some of these players are. And 𝗍𝗲 just does some of the most amazing things. For me, he's right up there with Jeff Farmer. That's the other one I'd have on the list. He wasn't in that list of players.
No, but this was his contemporaries around the same.
Yeah, but in terms of his ability to do, to do ordinary things and incredible things at the same time. His hardness at the pill is something that I think is really, really underestimated in this game. So Zach Butters, everyone would agree he's a total star, Zach Butters. Yeah. But these numbers, 𝗍𝗲 ranked, he had 21.2 player ratings in this game to Zach Butters' 15.9. And Zach Butters was their highest ranked player. They both got 7 coaches' votes, so really comparable on the night. 𝗍𝗲 probably let himself down with his disposal efficiency. It was only 57 to Zach Butters' 66. 21 disposals to Butters' 30, but, Butters played in the middle for most of the game. 480 metres gained to 579, which is 480 metres, pretty impressive for, he only had, I think, 8 centre bounce appearances, 𝗍𝗲. He inside 54 times. Zach Butters had 13 contested possessions, which is excellent, but remembering he's a mid, 𝗍𝗲 had 12. 12 contested possessions is fantastic. 7 ground ball gets to Zach Butters' 10. He had a centre bounce attendances was 61 to 28. So I think they're a really good comparison because they're very similar numbers, despite the fact that Zach Butters was 61% of the time he played as centre bounce attendances. 𝗍𝗲 had 2 clearances in the game, took 4 marks, one of which was contested. Butters only took 5 marks. And had 5 shots at goal and kicked 4-1. Just a brilliant game of football, just a fantastic game of footy from 𝗍𝗲. And I thought the goal that he kicked from the boundary after the brain fade by Marshall was just showed his class. And, that just goes to what we're talking about is how critical in footy is elite foot skills. That he never looked like missing that goal. He was calm, good technique and slotted it. And 23, is that how old he is? He won't reach his peak for another 2 years, 𝗍𝗲. So, because he played in his first year, it feels like he's been around forever. But we've got another 4 or 5 years, 6 years of 𝗍𝗲 playing, at the highest level of footy. So bring it on, I say.
And Degenerate's absolutely correct as well. For comparing small forwards, we don't have the Franklin's, Roughheads, Bruce.
Good point, actually.
Hipwoods and Danahers. And the other thing is 𝗍𝗲's playing. Cyril Rioli's the only real comparison because Cyril played forward and in the middle. But people like Charlie Cameron.
Rankin as well.
Just small forwards. They're not in the midfield, so 𝗍𝗲's working hell of a lot harder than any of those guys, and he is as good as Cyril, and the numbers that he's starting to produce indicate that he's actually a lot better than Cyril.
And I'll tell you, George, there was a moment actually now to think about it that perfectly sums up 𝗍𝗲, who I thought came into the game with a really great mindset. One of the things I'm really been super impressed with 𝗍𝗲 is he's taken out that last hit out of his game, and so he still puts pressure after the player kicks the ball, but he hardly ever gives that downfield. Doesn't flatten them. And so to me that shows a young fella who's learning and improving and he's not making the same mistake time and time again. But there was a moment that sort of for me summed up both his will in this game and his effort level, but also highlighted that discussion we're having about fitness and running power and ability to cover the ground. Now I completely forget, I'll think of it, who it was, but they broke forward. And I think it was on that turnover when Hoare turned it over. And so we're hopelessly out of position, whichever one it was, we're hopelessly out of position, and they hurt us on the rebound. And a Melbourne player, and I can't think who it was at the moment, was sprinting after, I think Butters or one of the Port players, making no ground whatsoever. 𝗍𝗲 passed him and almost caught the Port player and put some pressure on him. I think they scored on that play. But it just showed how slow the other Melbourne player was. I think who it was in second, and how important leg speed is for footy these days.
Was that Clary chasing Rosie? I think, wasn't it?
It wasn't Clary. No, it wasn't. Like Clary wouldn't have got as close as.
Well, he didn't. He didn't in that case either.
He was moving.
It might have been Hoare who turned it over. Maybe it was Hoare who was chasing him down, but Clary went past him and almost ran the Port player down. So,
Kozzy, you mean?
Kozzy, I mean, yeah, not Clary. Clary in my dreams.
Lefty says, it was a low-scoring game on a perfect night for footy. Any concerns that our three key forwards, Rui, Pets and Disco, failed to hit the scoreboard? I was happy that Petty and Turner were able to clunk marks up the ground, but I have grave concern over both of them being able to take marks, providing a leading option and score goals regularly inside 50. Now that we have had almost a whole season of these guys playing out of their natural positions as defenders, how have you rated their performances as forwards, and are you hopeful that they can play and contribute as forwards in 2025 and beyond and help us reclaim a finals berth? Monocular says, thanks for my favourite weekly podcast. Disappointed, of course, but far from devastated and more optimistic about the future than many of my mates. Scoring from inside 50 seems a perennial problem. Is it too simplistic to ask that these deep inside 50s to all spread out in different directions to both draw the defenders and create a one-on-one opportunities? As it is, kick it long to a pack of 6+ players isn't and hasn't been working. Is this poor coaching or poor execution or both? By the mids or by the forwards? Tony Lockett or Jason Dunstall would struggle in our forward line and they didn't have the luxury of a 666. This is the biggest frustration for most of our fans and probably our players. And we'll probably go more in depth in our post-season review. But George, your thoughts on the performances of our key forwards in this match and in the second half of the year, if you want to adjudicate on a body of work?
Yeah, this week I wasn't sure what was going on in the forward line. We've got a couple of young players who are completely stuffed, JVR in particular. But Fritsch is doing nothing whatsoever in these last couple of games.
Body language is a worry.
It's just awful. But a couple of the times, I was when we did have the ball, we were coming out of the middle in whatever form or coming down the wings. Our forwards were concentrated in the middle or just not moving, just not playing in front. There was no spread, which was the real concern. And once again, the people around me suffered because I just kept saying, don't kick it to the top of the square where Aleer is standing. And that's exactly what they kept doing. I remember Dermot Brereton years ago saying a forward should never lead straight at the person with the ball. They should be going sideways, firstly so that the person with the ball is more likely to be able to see them, but then the person with the ball has a greater chance of executing. It's very hard on the run to hit exactly the person on the chest coming the opposite direction. If you kick it to the side, or if the person leads to the side, then they've got far more space to operate in. They can adjust to the to what they're being delivered. But in this game, we were not doing that. There was Mono is absolutely right. We just kicked the ball straight into the forward line, top of the square, and it just kept on coming out, unsurprisingly. But that's a coaching thing, or there's something going on, particularly with Fritsch, that we're not aware of. But he's just not involved in the game.
Well, it's a coaching thing. At 3/4 time, the board said under reinforcement/solutions, the information in that board, George, it was there were 3. The first one was there was 4. The first one was play to win. So this is at 3/4 time. The second one was stoppage ... be proactive. The next one was pressure with 1.95, which must have been our 3/4 and our 3rd quarter. I've looked in a sec. But then the one that for the coaching direction that goes to your point is inside 50s, deeper option there. Yeah, that was the direction. So the advice, the direction from the coach at 3/4 time was to go deep in the forward line. I think that's partly to do with wanting to get territory and trap it in there and go back to that scrap style and not let it get out in the open where our lack of leg speed is going to get exposed. But I've been frustrated all season with, I think it's a really good point about our marking. I just felt like a kingdom for a contested mark up forward on Saturday night. Did not, 30 metres out, clunk one of those goals and go back and kick it. So again, though, the point, one, the ball movement's not quick enough to generate space in the forward line. But it's when you lose those players, it becomes that last kick inside 50 is what, it's got to be the most important, one of the most important kicks in footy, obviously. And we just miss targets and we're not putting it to their advantage. So I don't know that a lot will depend on the sort of preseason. I think, JVR is going to become a gun. He is a gun. But, it's been so frustrating us not being able to take a contested mark. Although I have to say, they're pretty hard to take full stop in the AFL.
They are these
50, so
they are these days.
As I said, I don't think they took one. We only lost 9 points. Just on they lost 33% of their defensive one-on-ones, so we still couldn't take advantage of it.
Singer says, Tomo sometimes gets a bad rap from Demonland, and obviously the match committee don't rate him as he only seems to get considered when we have an injury. Having said that, I always think he is commendable whenever he plays in the ones, only to get relegated back to Casey when the cavalry arrives back. What were your thoughts on Tomo's game and the back line in general this week? So, big man, do you rate Tomo's game and that of our defence, which was, to be fair, decimated pre-game with Bowie and Wowie being pulled due to illness?
Yeah, it must be frustrating for him. I thought he had a great game. I thought it was one of his better games this season, 100% time on ground. His disposal efficiency went at 92.3 in a team of butchers. That's pretty good, isn't it? Had 3 contested possessions, got 3 ground balls, took 4 intercepts, so pretty impressive from that perspective. I thought the defence was really well. It did a really good job considering Steve May was out, and I thought he did a good job. Tommy Mack is the weak link one-on-one. I think he struggled a little bit. I think he's sort of running out of puff too. Tommy Mack, he seems to he wanting the line. So I thought Tomo had a really good game. It suited him to sort of playing tight, scrappy footy.
Yep.
Suited Tomo because it didn't expose his sort of lack of leg speed.
Yeah, that's exactly it. He played the game that suited that type of game.
Like a VFL game.
That's exactly. Yeah, he didn't need the speed. He hasn't got the speed. If we were playing a different game style, he'd really, really struggled. But it was just stand there, be a big bloke, take a mark, get it out of the back line, do something safe. And that's
Use
exactly
it well.
That's all that was required, and he did
it. What could have been? Go Lordy says, hello, boys. I love the podcast. The great balance between analytics, wisdom, and MFCSS soothes my troubled brow and fuels my optimism. Tonight, I would like to contribute a little coulda, woulda, shoulda theory that I came up with to make myself feel a little better after falling short by a fraction once more. This year we have lost to Carlton by 1 point, the Lions by 5 points, the Giants by 2 points, and the Power by 2 points. Those losses totalling 10 points are the difference between us finishing 13th and finishing 5th on the current ladder. And while I haven't looked back at the first 3 losses, it was bad kicking a goal in the fourth quarter on Saturday night that cost us the game. We missed 3 gettables in the last and also had 2 posters during the night. If we can get May, Salem, Spargo, Windsor, Petrarca, Oliver and Gawn back to full fitness, my conclusion is, forward 50 connection problems notwithstanding, that we can look forward to a good year in 2025. Keep up the good works, chaps. He hasn't heard the Petrarca news. George, many on Demonland believe we're exactly where we deserve to be, and that's in the bottom 6 of the ladder. However, as Go Lottie points out, if we win some of those close encounters, it's the difference between bottom 6 and top 4 or 5. And I'm positive that Positive Binners sees this as a silver lining on a disappointing finish on the ladder. But first, George, and then Positive Binners, you can jump in.
Just about every other side in the competition will be saying the same. If we kicked a couple more goals, points, whatever it might be. In our case, don't forget that we got absolutely smashed by Fremantle twice and lost to West Coast. They're just as important as winning by a couple of points or whatever. Fact is, we lost them. Be it by 2 points or be it by 15 goals in one case. We've discussed various reasons and things. I hope 2025 is a lot better. I certainly do. But we have to wait and see what happens in the coming weeks, months.
It's not starting well, and the 2024 hasn't even finished.
We've lost Petraka.
Yeah, what's the count on the Petraka is gone thread now? What are we up to?
I'll get you with that in a moment. We are at 312. I think we were at 130 when we started.
Doing well. I think what we need to do is put up a Clary's gone thread as well. And that'll keep us
competing one. Or no, Goodwin's gone. Talk is Goodwin's got 2 more matches to prove himself.
No, we've probably already got one of those. So, yeah.
Just the central part of that is, again, so much comes back to our kicking. It really has been, pardon the pun, an Achilles heel for us for a long time. And it's a cliche, but it's a cliche because it's true. Is good kicking is good football, and the reality is we've lost a lot of matches purely because of inaccuracy. Having said that, all teams are inaccurate at different times, but we do lack foot skills.
All right, let's move on. At the break of Gorn asks, does anyone have any insight on why we have been scheduled to have the most home Saturday night games this year? We also have the most free-to-air games this year, 15, and 9 of those either on Saturday or Thursday night. Surely part of this is club driven instead of AFL fixturing luck of the draw. The Pies play the most of the interstate teams on Saturday or Sunday afternoon time slots at the MCG, which have great attendance rates, while we've gotten them on a Saturday or Thursday night, which are really poorly attended. For 2025, Port needs to request all games against small Vic clubs or interstate teams to be moved to afternoon slots. These Saturday and Thursday night slots against interstate teams are killing our crowd numbers, which has a direct financial impact. They also paint our supporter base in a bad light when they've been given the most unkind time slots for attendance this year. Now, I don't personally have any insights into why we've been scheduled certain teams on certain days or time slots, nor can I speak to which time slots against smaller Vic teams or opposition teams are better for our crowd numbers. I can speak to our poor form in the latter part of the season and not being in finals contention, directly impacting poor crowd numbers in the past month. We were never going to get a bumper crowd for interstate teams, particularly at GWS, when we're effectively out of contention, and that's always going to severely impact the crowd numbers. And another hot tip about the scheduling is that I can guarantee you is that we're not going to be in any position to dictate our fixturing for next season. If we couldn't get what we wanted in the years when we were finishing in the top 4, we're certainly not going to be able to have any leverage as a bottom 6 side. So you can kiss your Friday nights goodbye, your free-to-air goodbye. We're going to be back on Foxtel, and we'll be back at Cardinia Park and Hobart and zigzagging all over the country as we were pretty much zigzagging all over the country this year. So I don't forget fixturing. I'd be mad.
PSA, public service, a warning here of anyone who gets triggered by reframing and being positive and looking on the bright side. Is a bright side of finishing out of the 8. There's a couple really important ones, and one of them is fixturing. I don't know what the reasons are. They would have been happy. The club would have been happy with any free-to-air because they get more advertising revenue for the sponsors. I hate Saturday night games in winter. I'm fully on board that. Just like Port, GWS, you can just take those games. I can't stand it. It's so, cold. It's when the dew comes in midwinter and, that sort of autumn, winter nights at the G. I want to go to games with a red Sheridan Saturday afternoon, Sunday. So the one of the upsides of finishing outside the 8 get twofold. One of which is we will get more of those games. I'm happy. I'd rather a Sunday 3 o'clock than a Saturday night. I hate Saturday night games. Ditto for Friday night games. I don't. The financial stuff. That's obviously a concern for the club. But personally, I much prefer going to the footy during the day. As I said, I love the red chair and I love going to the G on a sunny day. We might get more of those games, ironically, because we're not in the 8. And the other really, realistically, a real positive advantage potentially is the draw that we'll get next year. That is a massive factor in football these days. Hawthorn's draw, there's Pie's draw was really hard. our draw was really hard this year.
Yeah, they do it 6-6-6. So the top 6, middle 6, bottom 6, and you play more teams in that cluster.
It really is a massive, massive, the Bombers, they might end up missing, but they wouldn't have been anywhere close to it if it wasn't for their dream fixture in the first third of the season. It has an outsized influence. And again, it's one of the things that the media they don't cover in the detail that they should, because they don't want to bite the bloody hand that feeds them. It's a joke, the fixture, but it might advantage us next year. And hopefully, we play sides below us.
Yeah, but just our luck. West Coast will come good. North will come good. St Kilda will come good.
Well, I don't think so.
Richmond will have a...
Not West Coast anyway, not St Kilda.
Did you hear Longmire's comments in retort to McRae's jab about the 50-metre penalty?
He's right, though.
What was the jab? No, I didn't hear it.
The jab was, this is coming from a club that's played 17 games in Melbourne, including 14 at the MCG.
Yeah, that has the biggest advantage in terms of fixturing.
And Sydney has to go interstate every second week.
That it is like a real issue for them when they can pull out the data straight off the top of their head.
But what's his name? Collingwood had the benefit of that exact free kick that they're complaining about, or the 50-metre penalty. They benefited from it early in the year against North Melbourne when they went.
And even in this game, Cox ran over the mark while he was meant to be standing while someone's kicking for goal and was never called up.
Yeah.
It should have been 50 metres and a goal to the opposition.
Similar to us, the GWS game, that still rankles. So some of the positives are we'll get a top 6 or 7 pick. We'll parlay part of that into a future rounder in Houston, and then we'll get a dream draw. And plenty of day games, plenty of 1 o'clock Sundays, 1 o'clock Saturdays.
And
I'll even go to Cardinia Park. Fine, no worries.
We got to write that one down.
We may get 2 first-round draft picks for Christian Petrarca as well.
Yep.
Hey. I'm not reframing that one. There's no positive there.
I'm only laughing because otherwise I'll cry. All right. Speaking of being screwed by the AFL, OMID says Mac Andrew would be a pretty useful player in our forward line. Monocular replies, sure, but am I correct in thinking we got JVR instead? And the AFL did do us dirty by changing the rules about academy players in the year we were set to snag Mac Andrew, as he was part of our academy, and if
changing it back to what it was next year.
And that's right. And then I said, if I'm not mistaken, the survey that's been rescinded, that law. But Monocular did correctly point out that if we did get Mac Andrew at pick 19 in the draft, that was the pick we used to get JVR.
JVR, I'd take JVR over Mac Andrew. Good on him for kicking that goal. It was impressive.
Yeah. But as impressive as he is,
The thing is, apart from JVR, Mac Andrew is a good player as well. So, but we put all the work and all the money and all the effort into one. Point. It's not just a draft pick, that we didn't get. And then to double it up, 𝗟𝗯𝗟𝗀𝗀𝗃 was given to the Dogs for a packet of chips because they had changed the rules. Now they've gone back to that. So
further, the hashtag AFL are out to get the Melbourne Football Club news. There's talk about them changing the father-son.
They will.
In the time into Jeff the White's phase, we're finally going to get `𝗍𝗍 and White, and it's like the AFL wake up in the morning thinking
and
about
then
ways to screw us over.
They'll change it after that.
But they'll change it back.
We had a couple of miscellaneous questions about delistings, tradings, and our needs in the draft, which I think we're just going to table for now for our season review show at the end of the year. I get the need that people want to ask these questions now, particularly because we're out of finals, but we still do have 2 weeks of the season to go. I don't want to answer these questions now because we're definitely going to be tackling them in the season 2024 review show, and then we'll just be doubling it up. So thank you to Jabroni, Murdoch 516 and number 10 who asked questions about our trading and drafting and all that. We will get to that. I'm going to start a thread on Demonland in a couple of weeks, and you can ask all those questions, and we'll definitely be covering that. in that show. We also had a question from Buck Neckard in regards to who we thought was our unsung hero this season. And it is a great question, and one that we'll no doubt also answer in the season review show. We always go over who are those type of things. We did have a voicemail from Rose Star with his miscellaneous thoughts on the game against Port, and he just snuck in a question before his 2-minute voicemail time allotment ended. So, I'm going to have to, I didn't put it onto my soundboard here. So, yeah, if you just give me a second, boys. While we're doing that, George, you wanted to talk about the, because next is where we talk about Casey. Casey had a bye. So, George, if you wanted to talk about the AFLW practice match, if you want to have a talk about that while I get this audio lined up.
Just a quick run down on the AFLW practice match against Carlton, and thanks to Peter, who provided me with a lot of information about the match because I wasn't there. But given that the sides play their first game at the end of the month, we need to spend a little bit of time on this. Firstly, we've lost a lot of players from last year. We lost Libby Birch to North Melbourne, Maddie Gay to Essendon, Eliza West to Hawthorn, Wilson to Gold Coast, 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝗁𝘀𝗁, Jordan Ivey, Johnson and Fowler all out of the side. We've got 9 new players playing in the side, and one of the reasons I didn't go to this match was we didn't have Taylor Harris, Rigoni, Paxman, Colvin, Johnson and the Mackin girls playing in this match, although Amy's not going to play for the whole season because she's done an ACL. So this was really a bit of a hit and giggle match, and really was a proper practice match just to see what the new girls in particular can do and how the team can work together. They only scored 1 point up to half time compared to the opposition's 4 goals, 3, and it turned into a 5-quarter match where the umpires disappeared after 4, and Ben Brown was doing the umpiring in the last or the 5th quarter. So it was just people going through the motions in some cases. We only went down by 2 points, whatever value you can put on the end score in any case in these sort of games. Importantly, the highlights were Grace Beasley, who's come into the side. She looks like a really strong player, and I think what we've seen over the last couple of years is the change in the body shapes in the girls. They are much, much stronger and fitter than what it's ever been. Lithe type players really don't have a future in this competition anymore. They will just get ragdolled quite literally. So Beasley seems to be that sort of hard player that we need. Witherspoon, can't remember her Christian name. She only played half a game but kicked 2 goals. Pisano, who's a small, tough forward, she played well. Eden Zanker came out, and I think she's put on a lot of muscle as well. Eden kicked 3 goals in the second half. We've got Gillard and Chaplin down back holding the wall. Rihanna Watt, who basically didn't play at all last year except for the last couple of games after coming back for an ACL. She's finally playing, providing us some ruck backup for Lauren Pearce. Interestingly, I hear the rumours are that Taylor Harris is going to move down to defence for the coming season, so that'll be something interesting to watch, although she didn't play in this game. And the reason is, of course, we've lost Birch and Gay, and down the back line we need a little bit more strength and marking power down there. So there's been a fair few changes, a lot of changes, 9 players in, 9 players out. That makes a difference to any team over the course of one season. So it'll be a good start. An interesting introduction to it, but keep your eyes out for the games in a couple of weeks.
All right, thanks for that, George. I have got Rose Star's voicemail lined up. I've got to pull the sound up on that channel. Here we go.
G'day, Demonlanders. Rose Star here. Oh, what a funny old lead-up to the weekend that was. For the first week in a long time, the game didn't really mean much. It was a bit of a disconnect, for me at least. Certainly impressed with the effort the boys gave. I think that was, a clear turnaround from last week. Still worried about Gawn, though. I think he's looking cooked, like he was a lot of walking. There was word that there was a bit of a bug going around or something but with the boys before the game, so maybe that was it. I think Clary can only and should only play midfield. I don't think that experiment throwing him back for 5 minutes was even remotely successful. He just looks lost. He just needs to be hunting the ball. 2 other players that are so frustrating. Fritsch, for starters, if that ball isn't delivered on a silver platter to him, he just gives up. There's so many times he could have crashed the pack, at least tried to make a contest, but just had to probably put in a little bit too much effort for him, and it's disappointing to see him falling off in the back. Billings tried hard, just for Christ's sake, he shits himself every time that ball comes near him, doesn't he? Like, he just fumbled so much in that last quarter and had the chance to win it and shanks it, and just, he's frustrating. And alternatively, I got a ticket to the box Sunday for the Carlton-Hawthorn game. And to watch the Hawthorn supporters getting up and down, I was pretty jealous, to be honest. But I guess, without saying too much about the footy, who's going to win the Bluey, boys? Probably Gawn.
And then it cut off.
Nibbler.
I'd have to say,
Langdon.
well,
I'm going to take my homework will be to listen to Roy Starr's calls and sharpen up my succinctness.
Well, I did. I shortened it a little bit, just cutting out some of the dead airspace. Max Gawn is leading our Player of the Year, and he cannot be overtaken, so he will take out his 3rd Demonland Player of the Year. He's 95 votes ahead of Jack Viney, and with 2 games to go and a maximum of 36 votes, you can get 18 each week maximum. So that's 36 for the 2 weeks. He cannot be overtaken. So Max will take out his 3rd. He will join Nathan Jones as another 3-time Demonland Player of the Year winner, but he is still 1 away from Clayton Oliver, who is a 4-time Demonland Player of the Year awardee.
What do they win for that, Andy?
Absolutely nothing, just the...
You've got to... Surely all these Demonlanders can come up with something to present them with.
It's been going since 2001. So we've got from 2001, Adam Uze, Clint Bizzle, Jeff White, Travis Johnston, Cameron Bruce, Nathan Jones, Brad Green, Aaron Davey, James Frawley, Jack Trengove, Nathan Jones. Nathan Jones has won it 4 times. Jack Viney, Max Gawn, Clayton Oliver, Max Gawn, Christian Petrarca, Clayton Oliver, Christian Petrarca, and now Max Gawn. So yes, it's we have similar players since 2016. Only Max, Clary, and Petrarca have won it, and Viney the year before that. And in 2 years, none of them might be at the club. So
yeah.
And Terence from Belgium Terence from Belgium's in the chat room to say that not only Clary won't be there and Track won't be there, Bailey Fritsch is relocating with his partner to Queensland, according to social media. Hot off the press.
I'm talking about I'd never heard that one.
That's right. Well, it's got as far as Belgium.
Yeah, that's right. What's that about the truth, the milk going around the world before whatever the lie gets halfway around the world before truth gets its shoes on, or some such thing.
We're not going to have any players. Maybe we'll relocate to Tassie and become the new team. All right.
Settle. That's enough of that. That's not even funny.
It's not known yet. This is injuries. It's not known yet whether we got through Saturday night's match against Port unscathed. But both Jake Bowie and Tajwa Woden were late withdrawals from Saturday night's match due to illness. Presumably, both will be available to take on the Suns on Saturday. Based on last week's injury report, it doesn't appear if any of the players currently on the injury list will be making a return this week. So let's get into the changes. Mandy Lorian says, now that 2024 season is officially over, should we be considering resting some of our star veterans who are or may be carrying some injuries like Max and Clary? And I guess you can add Lever. Should we be resting anyone in the end and play some kids?
Now that we're out of it, I'd be, if anyone needs surgery, put them in now. That's the go, isn't it? That's what they did in 2019. And, because, leaving aside where the track goes to Italy to become a chef, which is the rumour I've heard. It's like he's got a Netflix deal for his cooking show. I think he's just not going to play footy. Is his pre-season's going to be impacted by his spleen because he wouldn't have been able to do any running.
He's just started running now, rudimentary running.
Right.
So he's not allowed to get his heart rate over 110.
Yes. Yeah,
nor am I. So, so I've got to stop going to the footy because it was going about 180 in the last quarter. So now that we're mathematically no longer a chance to make the finals, I think with Clary, there's other stuff going on. It's the structure, keeping him involved. So maybe, but anyone who needs it now, be interesting to see whether they'll give Jefferson a run now, just give him a taste of AFL footy in the last couple of games.
Would you give Varel, or is he just really not ready yet?
I don't reckon. Well, I don't know.
Just to give him a taste.
Yeah, I would, because he is a player who's capable of being a backup ruck. You don't need to. You wouldn't be throwing him in against Wits and some other monster they've got. But here's the opportunity. We're crying out for a backup ruck all season. Here's the opportunity to actually give him a run.
And not flog Maxi in the last 2 weeks.
And not flog JVR and not flog Petty as a result.
And JVR's crook. Give him a rest and put Jefferson in. So
Varel's the only one I'd. Given the circumstances, this is the time to give him a run, because otherwise you're going to have to bring him in, season proper next year.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah. And just, I know you love the time on ground. That's the only statistic you come at, George. But Maxi, he was on 80. Time on ground at 86% of the time in that game. He was on the ground. I would be happy for Varel to come in and it's 50-50.
Yeah, or even take it down 30-60 or something, 30-70 or something like that. Max is on one leg; he doesn't need to be jumping on the whole game, especially against someone like Wits, who's just going to spend the whole game jumping into him.
Yeah. What's his F Wits? Is that his Frank Wits? What are we up to now on the count on the Petrarca count?
I'll give that to you in a sec. While I go into our preview, we have got 343. So,
what are they doing? Not listening to us?
Well, I don't know. We've got it. They could be listening to us. I've got it at the top of the page. It could be we could be background noise for people. The Demons' finals hopes were dashed on the weekend, and despite their win after the siren against the Bombers, the Suns are in the same predicament as the D's, albeit with almost 3 percentage points more. It's effectively a dead rubber. However, there are draft spot repercussions for the team that wins. The Suns have only lost one game this season at their home ground, the People's First Stadium in Carrara. Their only loss came at the hands of fellow Queensland team, the Brisbane Lions. The Demons are travelling interstate for the 7th time this season, only 3 times less than the Suns have travelled this year. George, followed by Bimman. How are we going to knock off the mighty Suns this week at their fortress? No doubt, no less, on the Gold Coast.
The way we're going to beat them is hopefully the Bureau of Meteorology forecast is wrong, and it absolutely buckets down for the next. It's already bucketing down up there in a big way, so we just need it to hang on for a couple more days and turn it into a real slog.
I don't think that's
spongy.
Happen.
We want really spongy grass.
Yeah, you might get that. I think I was telling Andy before the show, Ballon has had 200 mils today or something ridiculous just down the coast a little bit.
So it's going to rain the next few days there, but then Friday and Saturday are sunny and warm. So it's going to be about 25 degrees on Saturday.
No idea how we'll beat them, Andy. Yep. Apart from the fact that I want you to go up and watch the game.
I am going there.
Excellent. And if you could check out what they're writing on the board at 3/4 and quarter time, that would be really appreciated.
I don't own a pair of binoculars like you do. But no, I am going to the game.
I think the way we win the game is to kick a higher score than the Gold Coast Suns.
Geez, our previews are getting as we bow out of the season.
Well, we're officially in the silly season already with talk of track being traded. And the last year I'm following it, it's like a live code AFL is saying Melbourne will not trade Christian Petrarca under any circumstances, with Demon Power brokers on Monday night emphatic that suggestions he could play elsewhere in 2025 were wildly inaccurate. Close the thread now, please.
I'm not going to close it. This is is as much as it's clickbait for the rest of the media. It's clickbait for me too.
Yeah,
come
all the advertisers
and watch
happy.
the meltdown.
Yeah.
I'm selling tickets. Yeah, and also announcement: I'm going to be starting my breakdancing career, and I'm aiming to be at the next Olympics. So there we go. All right. Enough silliness for the night. Well, we're going to leave it there, and we will be back next week. If you would like to listen to the show live, please head on over to demonland.com on Monday nights at our new earlier time of 7:30 p.m. Thank you to our 5-star reviewer on Apple Podcast, Alex. Thank you to Alex, no fancy name. Thank you to our voicemailer, Rostar. Thank you to anyone who left a question or posted a comment. So thank you to Lazy, Go Lordy, Doug Reamer, Spargonigus, Radish D, Future 15, Middle Aged Demon, What Say What, Watson 11, Desperate, Kiwi D, Demonic Final Fantasy, El Diablo 14, Farmer, Adonsky, Smurf, Lefty, Monocular, Singer, At the Break of Gorn, Oh My D's, Jabroni, Murdoch 516, Number 10, and Buck Naked. And thank you to my hosts, my co-hosts, George and B-Man, and thank you to you, our loyal listeners. Don't forget, leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast from, and we'll read it out on the next week's show. Go Demons.
Go Red Leggers.
Come on, demons. Come on, demons. Come on, demons. Come on, demons.